Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news for May 13th, 2024. I have updated my OBS programs and set up scripts using it to automatically adjust the file name to the date now. So officially, as far as I'm concerned, which is really the main person to be concerned, we have I have crossed the line into just having dates on these episodes instead of having episode numbers, which episodic numbers for news doesn't really make the sense. So there is a survey here for 10 as far as Yu-Gi-Oh goes. More things you can buy coming, and 2 festivals being held in May, so I guess those are more things you can win. And then a Yu-Gi-Oh! Championships, which, yeah, we will probably do something around that, but not much. So I'm starting a little bit late today, later than I would like. I think what we want to do is on Mondays open 10 packs. Like it should have seen that earlier, that of the 3 days, Mondays is always the slowest day for video game news. Just nobody announces anything over the weekend, and so if I'm going to do anything extra, Monday is the day to do it when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just now warm-up, and today's one of those days. Like, I have more of these days, frankly, than the other kinds of days, where it feels like I'm just going to be a little bit low energy. So, can't even really do anything right now. We could look at the cards, but then we couldn't play with the cards, so there's just no reason to even look at the cards. So it is just ranked play that I should continue to try and play. Yeah, I did a few things here and there. Worked on my trending chart. I do think there is probably room to kind of redo that and have it have a release date for games, and then make a second chart so we follow trending charts for games that were released in, say, the last 6 weeks. Yeah, because inherently my current trending chart is giving me good information about what the top 10, top 20 games are, but it's not really giving me a lot of information about what the aspirational world of gamers would be, where gamers would play newer games and give newer games a chance instead of just falling into a lot of old habits. And inherently, you also have to admit that things like Counter-Strike 2 are just flooded with bots, and so there's no telling how many of the top 20, top 100, maybe even top 500 games are just so artificially skewed just because there's a massive amount of bots or something else going on to skew the SteamDB's database. But yeah, I think if I redid my macro that gathers the data and takes samples to include catching the release date of each game, which might take more work than it's worth, that would let me filter to more recent games. But both bits of information do show real trends that are useful to know. because you do want to know where the vast majority of gamers are playing, even if they are just playing old games. But it is, particularly for this year, going to paint a very terrible picture for 2024 when the end of the year wrap-up talk starts to happen and nobody is going to have anything to talk about at all. Besides making some tweaks to my menagerie of programs to try and automate things and get more things done faster, I've been just playing Fallout New Vegas. One thing that did occur to me, and I was fairly late into my experience, I'm probably close to 60 hours in, is New Vegas set in Nevada, Las Vegas area. So it would make a lot of sense if there was a robotic horse that you got early in the game that would make you walk through areas faster, twice as fast. There is a perk that will increase your walking speed by like 10%, but really you kind of need a mod that would almost double your walking speed by default. Like by default, it's pretty obvious. You need internal lighting mods, you need anti-crash mods. The game crashes like crazy. It seems like one thing that triggers it crashing a lot is if you walk through a door and then something scripted is supposed to happen as you walk through the door. Maybe the move there is to just not touch the controller at all until 2 or 3 seconds after you walk through a door. But yeah, anti-crashing, internal lighting, faster walk speed, adjustments to the over encumbrance. If some items such as food had no weight, it really wouldn't affect the game that much and would help you quite a bit. There is in fact 2 perks that you can go out of your way to get to reduce the weight of guns and weapons that are over 10 pounds to half their weight, and then reduce the weight of things under 2 pounds to half their weight. But anything in between 2 and 10 still would be the same weight, and that would be 2 perks. Not really worth taking. But yeah, when you try to compare it to much more newer games like The Witcher 3, where you have Roach as a horse that you can ride, or Red Dead Redemption, where you have horses you can ride, particularly with that cowboy feeling of New Vegas, a robotic horse, which there is a robotic horse on the poster, on one of the posters in the Fallout universe. So it wouldn't even be breaking canon to do something like that. Of course you can fast travel once you visited the place, but that still means there's a ton of walking to the first time you visited locations. I'm not really a huge fan of the layout of New Vegas either, where it seems like the last quarter of the game is all going to take place in the Las Vegas, New Vegas area, which is kind of in the center of the map, and 2/3 of the map is going to be mostly forgotten. I've interacted with more factions since the last stream, I think, and it definitely just reinforces the idea that you need to be on friendly terms with every single faction, even Kaiser's Legion, or Caesar's Legion, who are obviously depicted as being bad guys. But yeah, you need to be on friendly terms with every single one of them, at least before some kind of war is going to break out as part of the main story. On the other hand, if you are on very negative terms with some of the factions, then you'll be randomly attacked by those factions. At least that's true for Caesar's Legion, which gives you the opportunity to fight them and get their weapons and their armor, which could make up for the fact that even if you do find good armor in New Vegas, it's going to wear down and break, and you're not going to have replacement parts to repair it back up. There is another perk that would let you use a wider variety of items to repair items, and that is a perk to potentially consider. But the truth of it is, every single perk outside of intensive training is way worse than just taking intensive training and getting your base special stats up higher. Yeah. Then I guess the only other thing I really have to say about New Vegas is I took on a companion, got rid of Veronica, voiced by Felicia Day, who is probably your third opportunity to get a companion outside of Eddie the robot, who seems to be like a DLC companion who is just way too good to not get and have at all times. Of course, your science has to be really high, or your repair has to be really high to get him from one of the first cities you visit. But yeah, there was a sharpshooter named Boone, and I took him as a companion for a couple episodes, and he was just not revealing any companion quests. So then I switched him out for a normal, like, caravan lady. I think her name is Cassie, and she really would have been the second companion after Eddie that you could have gotten. And that immediately let me move her companion quests further along. So definitely seems like you need to take every single companion and do all their companion quests. Although inherently that is one of the things I'm concerned about in Fallout New Vegas, is that the companion quests are just going to be yet another symptom of an overwhelming problem of doing too many quests, or maybe too many quests that makes it a little too hard to figure out which quest you should be doing at what time. It really feels like it should just be a much more linear experience in my book. Of course, I'm sure Bethesda would never agree to that. Never like that for a second. I'm still finding locations in New Vegas. There's still a lot of things to do, but I am roughly at level 25, and for the base game without the DLC, the max level is 50, and with 2 DLC it looks like it probably goes up to a max level of 60. Although the vast majority of that time I'm going to spend simply taking intensive training perks to get the special stats up, to get the skill stats up to the maximum. So I'll have a fairly boring build at the end of the game, but the boring build will at least lead to being able to do everything. Lockpick 100. Hacking computers 100. But one thing that is surprising, particularly about New Vegas, is the fact that you could easily have oops, this was a mistake, I think. Like in New Vegas, you could easily have taken the caravan minigame that they added, the blackjack minigame they have, the roulette minigame, and the slot machine minigames, and integrated that into the hacking systems, where the computers around there would just sometimes force you to potentially force you to play a hand of blackjack, or maybe even just learn the rules of blackjack. But learning the rules of blackjack's not even that hard. But yeah, instead it is just like every other Fallout game, where it is the exact same boring hacking minigame. It's the exact same boring lockpicking game. The lockpicking minigame is the same lockpicking in the Skyrim Elder Scrolls series of games too, so there's just no variety in that at all. I'm a half surprised that, and maybe they will in the next Elder Scrolls game, that they may just have some kind of magical theme around the hacking minigame. We have to reveal words. And with like Wordle being super popular, it would make a decent amount of sense to to integrate something like Wordle or some other kinds of puzzle games in there to just have more variety. There is way too much written dialogue in New Vegas, I think, even compared to Fallout 3, and I would absolutely say that the balance of interesting places is way lower in New Vegas, whereas almost every area felt a little bit more memorable, and at least in the totality, Fallout 3 had areas that were way more memorable. The vaults were more memorable. The Republic of Dave was just a one area you could easily miss and doesn't matter. Yeah, my main complaint about Fallout 3 is that you could miss half the game and you'd actually regret it. My complaint about Fallout New Vegas, very well maybe you could miss half the game and you wouldn't even care. Yeah, Fallout New Vegas is definitely setting me in a bad position to go on to play a Fallout 4. I think at best I probably am going to take some form of a break and then try to play like the Metro series. Also, New Vegas being in a desert has to be compared with newer games like Borderlands, which Borderlands being in the desert, being an RPG game where it's just dumb fun and it's just running around picking up guns, and if there is a quest or a character talking to you, you're never supposed to take it seriously. You're just supposed to have some fun with it. Borderlands definitely feels better in its systems and its mechanics and its weapon uniqueness, in level layout and design. Borderlands is not stuck in this way of thinking that NPC characters need to have schedules where they go to they need to have a bed where they'll go to sleep at night, and then you have to find them sleeping if you happen to be in an area at nighttime. Which, yeah, the fact that Bethesda games do that is just ridiculous. It's not even a good simulation. Even when it was first released, I don't think Bethesda games would have ever been considered good simulations of a living world. It's just something I imagine. Bethesda games are heavily just edicts and proclamations, if I can say that word, from Todd Howard. And so Todd Howard says it has to work this way, And then you have entire generation after generation of games from Bethesda that have to work that way. But also there's little evolution. Even Fallout 4 didn't come out and get reviews where everything had been revolutionized and everything was better and makes more sense. New Vegas makes very little sense when you go to the reloading stations and can convert bullets to other kinds of bullets, but then it's never really helpful or necessary to do that, and you never have the primers that you need to craft the kind of bullets you would want to find. So it's just yet another system that's been crammed into the game, when a full-on remake of the Fallout series by a different team would clearly eliminate several systems and streamline the game. You would clearly eliminate a large majority of the vendor trash in Fallout games that just have no value. Or you'd break down vendor trash from your menu. You'd redo the menus quite a bit. There's definitely no reason why you can't drink Nuka-Colas in a merchant's menu while you're going through your inventory, or repair equipment while looking in a merchant's menu. Yeah. I think I've probably lost here. Yep. I should have activated that spell card. Just for daily achievement reasons. Let's see. Yeah. The comparison to Red Dead Redemption is also a very valid one, because there are rumors now that Red Dead Redemption, which would be the first in the Red Dead game, I believe, might be getting a PC port finally, because they definitely did something kind of weird there. And when they released on PC the newest Red Dead Revolution, without having a PC version of the first game. But let's go through the news here quickly. Well, it's not going to be that quick, let's be honest. But just do it in the order that I have tabs open. So the Marvel Rivals team has apologized for seeking to restrict negative coverage. NetEase plans to revise its excessively restrictive terms on its content creator program. Now, funnily enough here, I totally forgotten Marvel Rivals had ever even been announced as a game. I vaguely recall seeing this concept art, but this is the first bit of news I've even heard about it, and it is negative press pointing out how they are trying to restrict negative press, which inherently, this is the problem with all of these content creator programs. Nintendo notoriously trying to have one of these too, is that it is, you get to run a YouTube channel without major threat of being DMCA'd, but in exchange you're selling your soul as far as being an independent journalist or critic in any way, and have to abide to massively restrictive rules. And those kinds of contracts alone are good reasons why you should just not cover companies' games that require those kinds of things, or try to require those kinds of things. Yeah. Video game critics, content creators in general, like me, like way more people who are successful than me, have all of the leverage they could ever desire to not put up with even the slightest bit of mistreatment from game developers or publishers, whoever it would be, because there are just a near infinite number of other games you can play. And sure, some people want to play Nintendo games, they have nostalgia for Nintendo games, so I can see why the Nintendo content restrictions may have been followed by a few more people on YouTube and Twitch, but even in that, you really were selling your soul just to play Nintendo games, just to be forced to say only positive things about Nintendo games. And I think most content creators have realized that there's as much, if not more, enthusiasm around emulating and playing old Nintendo games as there is around playing the brand new Nintendo games. And I doubt Nintendo was sending a lot of review copies to small time creators. I'd assume that they were still requiring people to pay full price. Nintendo, speaking of Nintendo, was the company that bought the wireless video streaming company out. So they used it on the Wii U to wirelessly stream video to the Wii U tablet. That would be a technology if they could expand on it and do something better with it. That would be fairly interesting. If all of a sudden a Switch 2's dock was capable of receiving wireless video from a Switch 2 tablet console, that would be very cool. Just press a button, I would assume on a Switch 2 would be the idea. You press a button on the Switch 2, then the video immediately streams to the dock, streams to your TV, video and audio. Do I have anything else to really say about Red Dead Redemption for PC? Well, speaking from the terms of like the Nintendos of the world, companies like Nintendo, you have to also admit that Rockstar is really in that same boat, and that they have been a little bit shady, a little bit anti-gamer in their actions and their GTA Online microtransaction desires. They've made some great games in the past, certainly, but you do have to take it with a bit of bitter salt that not every single one of their actions has been great for gamers or the gaming community themselves. this works. I think this will be our last game, so we can just focus on the news today. Okay. Could have activated this effect and destroyed that. Not that would have helped any. We're making progress on the dual pass. We're ranking up slowly. Over 5,000 damage, but not over 8,000 damage. That alone gave me 4 more legacy packs. Where does that put me as far as daily quests? Yeah. It does feel like you can spend 30 minutes and get the daily quest done instead of spending an hour or longer. You're just not really making enough progress. It says deal over 8,000 damage in a single attack. 8,000, it should say 80,000. I think. Some of these lifetime goals still would take forever. So, at this point, and I've said this before, but I think it is time to officially turn off notifications or mute. Let's see, how do you do this? Oh well, I guess I'll figure it out. Larry Herb. What I am taking from this, seeing just kind of the inane things he's tweeting, I'm not gonna hold it against him to tweet Happy Mother's Day, but I will hold it against him to Happy Monday. This is going to be a good week. I can feel it. Or replying or tweeting about turning ceiling fans to winter mode clockwise from summer mode, or from winter mode clockwise to summer mode counterclockwise. I like the British term anti-clockwise. It uses less words and it's just as logical. But yeah, his tweets are so all over the place. Sometimes, occasionally, he will tweet something about video games, but even in this, he's playing like Super Mario World, not anything. He's tweeting about the ASU ROG Ally X, which is the new ROG Ally that's coming and might be slightly better. Might not be anything revolutionary though. Yeah, running polls whether you keep your text forever. He's just not doing anything that would make him relevant as far as his Twitter tweets, and I'm wondering if this isn't a direct reflection of what Major Nelson Larry Herb was like when he was in charge of Xbox. Really, was he just this manager who didn't really know anything, didn't really care, was just kind of zoned out, would maybe go on to the Xbox podcast once a week and talk about video games there, but then would mostly ignore Xbox and even his business duties around Xbox for the rest of the week. Yeah, it's impossible to really know, but it certainly does lead a potential tinfoil hat conspiracy style thought pattern that Larry Herb painted the way to demise for Xbox, to the point where Xbox is now, which is a little bit of demise, in that he was just not a strong, involved leader and didn't really have video games as a passion, which does bring about an interesting question, in that particularly in the game industry, gamers, or at least mainstream video game journalists, always push this idea that the CEO of Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo should be these fully informed, intelligent gamers. But the reality almost certainly is that you get 2-3 steps from the bottom of the ladder in any company, and you're just going to have middle managers who are paper pushers and just look at numbers and don't even know what the company makes or delivers on. They only look at the intakes and the outtake line on an accounting spreadsheet, and that's their job. Yep. And when you get to the top of the ladder with CEOs, in any other industry, you definitely would expect them to not know or care what's going on. I don't think Jeff Bezos is buying things on Amazon.com or knows how anything actually happens on Amazon.com in their corporate structure. I bet he just sees some reports from the managers directly below him. But yeah, and I think the lie there, that in the gaming industry you do have managers that pretend like they're big in the games, is not being helpful, and it's really just them presenting the face that they think people expect instead of being honest, which would be better. Honesty is almost always the better policy. Of course, we can't blame Major Nelson for anything that's happened recently. We can only say that Major Nelson, Larry Herb, maybe was incredibly hands-off running Xbox for years, and now that Phil Spencer's in charge, Phil Spencer has to be the bad manager to start laying off people, shutting down companies, and whipping companies into shape. But yeah, if I was to bring up the years that Larry Herb was in charge of Xbox and the games that were released within that time, I think you will find large gaps of time where there just wasn't a game being released when there should have been. Speaking of Microsoft, it is also worth pointing out, and I don't know if you really would even call this a tinfoil hat conspiracy, Melinda Gates is going to be retiring from the Bill and Melinda Gates charity. Now, people have argued that the Bill and Melinda Gates charity is, while it may be doing some small bits of good here and there, people have argued that it is mostly an extremely rich person's way of avoiding paying taxes and inheritance taxes to their children and offspring, because there's apparently some kind of tax loophole there where if you were to give the money directly to your children, that would be a problem, but if you were to set up a charity, you can avoid paying taxes, possibly give your kids high salaried positions inside that charity. Now, the even lesser tinfoil hat conspiracy on that is that Bill Gates' name was on the Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island list, plane charter list. So, like a lot of celebrities, which it seems like maybe a significant number of celebrities, Jeffrey Epstein was flying rich and famous people trying to get influence, very much likely trying to get blackmail material against rich celebrities. And Bill Gates got wrapped up in that, and when that came to light, Melinda Gates was very upset about that, rightfully so. And so I would heavily suspect that there is a personal, private separation that has already happened and is in the process of happening even further between Bill Gates and Melinda Gates. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or two we hear Melinda Gates is going to very publicly divorce Bill Gates. Although it seems like she's trying to keep everything fairly quiet. I don't know the age of their children. They may be still fairly young, and that might affect things greatly. Bill Gates is still a major shareholder in Microsoft, and his voice still carries a lot of weight. He definitely hasn't just disappeared into retirement as much as you might make it seem like it's the case. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Gates tried to even be more active in Microsoft or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I would say the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation really has done a very poor job of doing as much good as it should have for the amount of money that Bill Gates and Melinda Gates have. Yeah, if it's just a matter of throwing money at the problems, which it seems like it often is, more good should have happened by now. Although a lot of times it isn't just a problem with throwing money at the problem, because there are just too many people who will steal all the money as middlemen, too much corruption at every level to make sure none of it reaches the right locations. And inherently, I think a lot of tech people think that they can just save the world through their technical knowledge without realizing that they have no economic knowledge that's worth mentioning, or socio-political knowledge. So, yeah, sure, you could potentially invent a pill that would cure cancer, but that does you no good if there are several countries that will refuse to take the pill or distribute the pill, or several countries that will assassinate you and bury the evidence of the pill, or several corporations that would assassinate you and bury evidence of the pill. Yeah. So I guess that's my Microsoft minute, much longer than a minute there for today. But yeah, overall, I think it's time to mute Major Nelson. He has completely lost credibility with me as far as what he's obviously focusing on now. It's just not interesting or relevant to follow. Video Games Chronicles says that fans are revolting after EA nerfs EA Football Club rewards that were too good. The company simply can't do things right. So, an error, part of this was that an error saw fans receive some of the best players in the game shortly before it was patched. So people benefited for an error in their favor, bank error in their favor, basically. And now EA is nerfing the cards, which, yeah, that is not the way to do it. If you make a mistake, you just have to eat that mistake, even if it ruined your game balance completely. The right thing to do is, if an error gave really, really good cards out, would be to introduce even better cards and just create power creep. That's not great, but it's the better move. Just slowly introduce platinum versions of all the other cards, giving all the other cards a balancing factor. Yeah, I would assume these numbers are on a scale to 100, and these are the numbers that are way too powerful. So, just introduce feature creep. Introduce new characters that average at 105 and instead of 97 or 96. And then that would settle that problem without a huge fan revolt. Although, as a gamer from the outside looking in, somebody who doesn't really appreciate EA sport games and wish they would just die a quick death, I kind of would like to see this fan revolt be more of a lasting fan revolt and see the soccer fans out there move to a non-EA soccer game, if there even is a competitive non-EA soccer game, which there might be now that they don't have the FIFA license. It does seem like if FIFA licensed their name to any other company and released a game within one season, this would be more fuel to that fire to jump over the FIFA games. And certainly that's another thing Microsoft could have dipped their toe in, is to buy the license to FIFA and make a soccer game, or buy a company that was known for making a soccer game. If Microsoft did have some kind of sports game, a football, soccer, probably soccer is your good one, your best bet, and then they were getting annual income, massive income from just microtransactions and doing basically the same thing EA did, that would help them with more stable funding, I imagine. Let's see. Moving on, Sony has reportedly formed a studio with former Deviation Games developer Jason Blundell is seemingly involved with the studio. Now, Deviation Games, I think, shut down not too time ago. Deviation Game was founded in 2020 with two experienced Call of Duty developers. Didn't get a chance to release its debut project, an original IP that was set to be an exclusive for PlayStation platforms. In September of 2022, 2 years later, one of Deviation Games' co-founders, Chief Creative Officer Japheth Blundell, left the studio, and that seems to have just kept Deviation Games in a stasis mode. And so now that he's back, so what you should probably take from this is Deviation was reportedly over 100 strong employees, over 100 employees in 2021. And they all seem like they've just been sitting around doing nothing, at least on the outside looking, and maybe they have been secretly working on things. And it seems like the only reason Sony is unsticking these people, that would be a very Japanese thing too, to just have 100 employees doing busy work because you don't want to hurt your record of never firing anybody. So yeah, but this highlights where the celebrity worship in video games, even amongst corporations, the managers in video games, seems to be way too high. That Jason Blundell, one person leaves the studio is put into stasis for years. This one person comes back, then the studio comes back potentially as a new team. At least these are all the rumors. Meanwhile, from the outside looking in, as far as I can tell, Deviation Games never even made a game or released anything, so as a gamer we should feel absolutely nothing from the idea that a new team has been formed and some of the people who were on this old team that never did anything have been recruited. And certainly it's almost certainly going to be a case that not every single person of the 100 strong, over 100 strong in 2021 are coming to this new team. Let's see, is YouTube creators also on the chopping block? Let's see. Here you have YouTube creators retweeting the CEO of YouTube saying it's time for creators to win an Emmy. Mr. Beast, Sean Evans, the Hollywood Reporter. So he's pushing for Emmys to be handed out to YouTubers, which, if anything, that would really just highlight how Emmys are losing their relevance, like all main TV is losing its relevance. And so if the Emmys got desperate enough, I imagine they would give YouTubers a Emmy. Of course, we do have awards like the Webbies that have been around and nowhere as big for a long time. But yeah, the prestige of an Emmy is much, much higher than the prestige of a Webby. That being said, if you logically were to follow down this path, if YouTube content was supposed to be to the level that it deserved an Emmy, it would have to have the kind of production polish and budget of other Emmy award winning content, which would mean millions and millions of dollars of an episode, and it would push the likes of Mr. Beast and only a few other content creators who can spend that kind of money just even higher and further away from every mid-tier and low-tier YouTube content creator. And it's just not going to work. But YouTube cannot follow the Hollywood model of Hollywood accounting and just spending millions and millions of dollars for 5-minute commercials. It just can't be that way. Part of democratizing the ability to create content is also reducing the expense of creating content, because if poor people can't create content and compete against the likes of Mr. Beast, which is a fair criticism for content creators like Mr. Beast already, then that is not a democratized or equal playing field by any means. And the whole YouTube system definitely rewards the most successful already, paying them more money, giving them more money to spend per episode to make more episodes or better polished episodes. Otherwise, we have YouTube creators tweeting some more ridiculous stuff. I think I'm ready to mute them too. I think it's time for a cleanup. Here you have them talking about Mental Health Awareness Month, maintaining creative work-life balances. YouTube really does nothing for any of that. Yeah, this is, I think, another one where we can just mute YouTube creators, since they have proven themselves to not be that useful. Let's get back to more video game specific news. We have Gamatsu saying that Shin Megami Tensei 5 and all DLC is going to be delisted on June 13th. This is, I assume, in direct reaction to the release of Shin Megami 5 Vengeance, due out on June 14th. The accusation that has been said, particularly from the Japanese fans who mostly played Tensei 5, is that it was effectively an early access beta for what Vengeance was, and they abused the players by not being honest about that and selling DLC to now correct it in perhaps the only way you really could correct it, which is to delist the game, the original game, and the DLC, and just release Vengeance, which has the main game and the DLC and extra content. But yeah, the situation you're in now is that if you had bought the game originally but not bought all the DLC, you either are going to have to decide whether it's financially worth it to you to buy the DLC, or you're never going to get the DLC, or just go ahead and buy Vengeance, which I believe has even more content than what all the DLC combined does. But yeah, that's definitely not the way to do that. And because it's a Japanese company, it doesn't seem like Atlas is willing to give free upgrades to Vengeance, which that would be the right move. And you could still do that, but it would be better to announce it and not just delist the game a day before Vengeance comes out. What happens if there's a delay when Vengeance comes out? Will there be several days in which you just can't buy Shin Megami Tensei 5 at all? But yeah, I wouldn't be so upset if there was some kind of precedence where games got delisted and then a day after the game gets delisted they gave free upgrades, a bit of DLC or something for the game that would just upgrade it to the new version of the game. Of course, there is still a case where you might be trying to keep digital archival copies of the old games, and it certainly can get difficult if Valve pushes people to play the newer version of the game, particularly if the newer version of the game might have bugs or something in it that we're unaware of. But yeah, that seems like a weird thing. Singed Gaming said they were going to start doing some more stuff, and the thing they've done after this channel update on April 24th has not been really that much. Let's see, apparently 3 Chinese Nintendo Switch games are being imported to China, and that's been retweeted. But yeah, he hasn't really done anything since April 24th, and what he has done is he has rebundled videos he's already made into longer videos, effectively trying to double dip. And these are the anime censorship videos that just don't feel 100% correct being on a YouTube channel called Censored Gaming. Yes, I suppose in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which this is how 4Kids censored Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes 1 through 12, which really breaks down to somewhere around 4 or 5 individual videos that he's just merged all together as one long video. But yeah, in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh!, yes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of spin-off games, but inherently you have to say Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a manga that did really well in the first issue, surprisingly well around the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. The manga was going to have the main protagonist play a different game every issue, but the Japanese fans were so interested in the card game that they did a pivot, and I think they may have even done a full reboot on the manga to just be around card games. But yes, there was that manga that led to the anime, that led to the censored 4Kids cartoon, slightly censored. It's not really significant amounts of censorship to be too upset about for kids cartoon, particularly since I think you can probably watch the Japanese dubs anyways. It's definitely way better than what Robotech did, where they took 3 separate shows that were in no way connected and cut footage into each other. But yeah, the censorship is there's sometimes some panning shots that will show the legs of Mai, and 4Kids would just show like the top half. This guy's wine, which they called juice in the dub, broke. His wine glass broke, and then there was wine on his hand. It looked too much like blood for 4Kids, so they got rid of it. The dialogue in this scene that's being shown has some of the male protagonists, male friends, joking that they were going to peep in on her while she was showering, but they don't actually do it, and they don't actually show anything. In fact, the most you see in episode 1 through 12 is some legs on Mai, and the Harpy ladies, who have much more of a string bikini type look in the Japanese, and they've just had clothing add to them. When they have the I think it's elegant egotist armor put on in the original anime, they would have a breastplate with spikes on the nipples. They take off the spikes on the nipples. None of that really affects me or offends me that much, knowing it was made for a kids anime, kids cartoon, before kids even knew what anime really was back in the day. Like, even today, I would still feel more comfortable showing a 8-year-old, a 6-year-old the 4Kids Yu-Gi-Oh! Dubbed version than I would showing them the uncensored dubbed versions of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Shadow Realm is a made-up concept that 4Kids made, where in the anime version, people were just straight up being killed and dying, sometimes coming back to life, I assume. Also, the biggest thing about that is when you start to look at what gets censored in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, it just really speaks to how much more permissive parenting is in Japan, and how much they just expect their average kid to be able to handle violence, blood, gore, and even nudity, and how much of a pampering helicopter parent style is prominent in the West, particularly the United States, where the United States parents want everything censored and everything squeaky clean before they would even begin to let their kids watch it. And I can testify that most of those parents are still going to be upset about their kids watching Japtoons, which is what they used to be called. A very offensive term not to use nowadays. Or watching anything fictitious. There's a high number, higher than you would think, of parents who are literally upset that their kids aren't just studying the Bible 24/7, and that they have any kind of interest in fantasy or any other kind of information whatsoever. And then you definitely run into a problem in the United States that even if you're a permissive parent and you let your kids watch this slightly offensive, not really, dubbed version, original version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, then they're gonna go talk about those episodes to the other kids in their school, which will then inevitably talk about those episodes to either the teachers or the other parents. And so you will have all of a society, all of a school system, or all of a parenting society giving you side eyes or complaining about the fact that you're not pushing censorship as much as they are. But again, I can't really blame I can't say censorship is a bad thing for kids, because at a certain level that's just finding the age appropriateness. Censorship is a bad thing for adults, even young adults. Maybe 16, 17, 18 is your own personal line, but yeah, when you have censorship where an adult, someone who can be drafted into a war, somebody who can drink, somebody who can vote, when they can't enjoy any kind of content they want, that's a problem in my book. We could talk about the TikTok ban, certainly, too. We'll see what the courts really say about that. I did want to show off this cosplayer. I really shouldn't show off cosplayers too much, but she's not too much of a lewd cosplayer. Fallout is still getting some enthusiasm around cosplay from the Amazon Prime series. And I would just say the bright letter style of this really, I think, works well as far as a Fallout jumpsuit. Instead of the slightly darker blue fabric that's in the TV series and in the games, a full copper Pip-Boy seems like an odd choice, but who knows, that might literally be canon, that they were made of copper originally and then they just turned black over oxidization over decades. But yeah, I imagine a suit like this would not have worked on set for the Amazon Prime Fallout series. It would have just torn and been too tight and clinging. But particularly with the makeup and hair, the features are something that I think I would prefer in the Fallout series. Fallout New Vegas has some real weirdness around its custom character creations, in that you have like what look very much more like Mad Max characters with spiked hair, spray painted different colors, and in New Vegas, where everything else is brown or shades of brown, having a bright pink hair or bright yellow spiked hair stands out when you see some of the gang's members have that. Noticeably in New Vegas, one of the female companions, I gave a specific type of armor to her, and when she put it on, she was given a female version of that armor instead of a male version of the armor. So they're wasting time making male and female versions of the armor. But in New Vegas, the female version of the armor has quite the neckline. There is a character, a class of a faction called the Great Khans, and one of the outfits in New Vegas with the Great Khans is that it is just a female wearing a biker vest, completely topless under it. You're not seeing anything, but yeah, there definitely is more lewd imagery in New Vegas here and there, just where it's gonna surprise you. You'll be 20 hours into the game and then all of a sudden you go, well, that seems a little bit weird. That's kind of not what Fallout 3 was. But yeah, I'd like the face generator to be way better than even I suspect it is in Fallout 4 for the Bethesda games. I would like the hair generator to be way better. And if they moved everything to the Unreal Engine, then the face generators and the hair generators would be much better. It's also worth pointing out that in New Vegas, the number of voice actors voicing the secondary characters is very low. It's like 2 or 3. So you'll hear the same voice in multiple people saying different lines. It's pretty low budget and low effort. Yeah, I feel like Obsidian was just not given enough time to really finish the game, or to enough budget to really polish the game. You definitely feel that in other points of New Vegas too, because there definitely are some points in New Vegas where it just feels like there should be more. Like the Great Khans faction, when you get to their city, there's a lot of tents with doors on the tents, and you can't go inside the tent and see what's going on in the tent. And yeah, that definitely feels unfinished. Well, I increasingly have less and less to say about the National Video Game Museum, but I definitely do want to celebrate when it does seem like they are doing something new, because pretty much for the past couple of years, very possibly because of COVID. It feels like they've not gotten any new exhibits or really had enough pictures to even show what was in their museum. And it definitely created a feeling in me that the National Video Game Museum was about 50% a token arcade and 50% pretending to be a kids museum. With every new exhibit, it seems like it's becoming more and more of a museum. They did have several one-of-a-kind items from the original Super Mario Bros. Live action movie from many years ago that failed slightly before the new Super Mario Bros. Movie came out. And now they have a History of Pokemon exhibit. And so it's really only one thing, one picture. Still not really taking enough pictures to promote themselves, and not really tweeting enough here. The last thing they tweeted before this was on February 22nd, and this was a tabletop adventures promotion that I don't think even had anything to do with the National Video Game Museum. It seems like it was completely separate. Well, let's see if we can click on the picture and use my magnifier to just see what they've got. Okay. Up here, this is the Mario Brothers movie. I don't know why it is here. That's not it. And then you have a banner highlighting what I would assume are the Western release dates of Pokemon games. And so you just have a timeline banner showing all of them. Although, the timeline banner probably doesn't do as good of a job highlighting all the remakes and reboots. Like Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee here should really have a line that goes all the way back to Red and Blue or Yellow. Some of these games obviously are evolutions. And then there's another picture here that looks like it's a picture of dinosaurs. So I assume this is the Mario Brothers movie again. So I don't know why there's a Mario Brothers movie either poster or still from the image or in the Pokemon exhibit. And so that's that across the top. A big Pokemon sign. And then in here we have what looks like Weta. I believe that's the name of the company, rated potentially mint conditions of a lot of the games, which that is moving certainly forward towards what a more hands-off museum would be. Is that all these are sealed in plastic. I don't know if you inherently should follow Weta and have things sealed in those plastics those ways, encased in those plastics. Here is a Pikachu Nintendo 64. That's probably some kind of Pokemon, either board game or a bunch of Pokemon cards. There's a Pikachu Game Boy Color, I believe. And there's a Pikachu Game Boy. This is probably, this would be a Pikachu Game Boy Advance. This would be a Pikachu Game Boy Color or Game Boy. And yeah, I have no idea what this here is. It looks like it might be a board game. So yeah, all in behind glass on under bright lights. That is very much more hands-off as an exhibit around Pokemon than what the other Nintendo video game museum exhibits have been. What you would expect previously would have been exhibits where there would have been a bed with Pokemon sheets on it and Pokemon dolls all over the place, Pokemon pillows. But my concern about those hands-on presentations were that the items they were showing were likely getting destroyed prematurely by just having people be encouraged to see them and touch them, or just it being in open air. Most museums are more of this, behind glass, hopefully lasting forever. So this might even be an evolution of how the museum is thinking how it wants to run. Is it going to be around for 2 or 3 generations, or is it going to have just a bunch of ever degrading items? So this looks to me like this is just one poster in the background, and you're just supposed to walk up to this poster and read all that text, I imagine, and I'm not sure kids are going to be super excited about that. This looks like they've got a Pokemon Stadium that's playable on a TV just cut out into the wall, so there is a little bit of interactivity, but that may be it. Yeah. So, but take note here, this is just a traditional Nintendo 64 with a Pokemon Stadium plugged into it, and really only one controller. I assume this is Pokemon Stadium. And that's not a Pokemon branded controller. So they are putting just some of the more common equipment to actually be touched by kids. And then over here, I'm not sure what these Pokeballs are, whether these are these could be anything. These could be packs of cards, which would be believable, just an entire box of Pokemon cards of several generations, or they could be other Pokemon memorabilia. This whole shelf down here feels like it's several different things of memorabilia. There was so much Pokemon memorabilia, and my own Nintendo collection in particular is almost 50% Pokemon memorabilia. So looking at this, here's some specific cards. I wouldn't be surprised if this entire shelf is just cards. But yeah, my own Nintendo collection, while there would be some overlap here, it wouldn't really be that much overlap because there's just so much. And yeah, my collection could easily take up 2 or 3 times as much of this space if it was properly on shelves and displayed and everything was just separated out. Right now my collection is taking up a car's worth of garage, floor to ceiling. So imagine a van, a garage that could hold one van, floor to ceiling. That's my entire Nintendo and Pokemon collection. And then they have some other things here, and these things are like, I almost certainly have a plush that is something like that. These look like pins. Oh yeah, I definitely had this Pokedex toy. These action figures, maybe, probably not all of them. These might be stickers or a match game. Some of that. It's really hard for me to remember. Now these blue boxes here, these should be the Pokemon Burger King boxes that have gold Pokemon cards inside of them, if I'm remembering correctly. And I have some of those. Dolls and plushies. I'm not sure what this is. This almost looks like a KFC tie-in. I don't remember KFC. Some of this even looks like it might be Japanese Pokemon stuff, which would be easy enough to have that happen. There was a massive amount of Pokemon stuff released. Yep. These look like these are card packs here. I don't know how many card packs I really have, but I do have some cards. Not that I know if any of them are in mint condition or of any real value that way. This doll here, yeah, definitely have Pokemon dolls. Probably have a Pokemon t-shirt or two. Giant Pokemon thing here. Yeah. And there's a lot more. Let me not just selfishly compare this picture to my own collection, but there are clearly some things here that could be added. In that there is the Pokemon Adventures manga. I'm not seeing that on the shelf yet, so having good museum copies of those prints would be a targeted item you'd want to get. There is the Pokemon cartoon in either VHS form, which there is different art on the side of the VHSs than the DVDs, than the Blu-rays. So there is an argument, certainly, to try to get a complete collection of all the VHSs for the Pokemon cartoon, as many of them as they made. I'm sure they don't make VHSs for the newest Pokemon cartoons. But then also get it in DVD and also get it in Blu-ray if they ever released it in Blu-ray, which they very well may not have. But the manga for Pokemon Adventures, and I think there's probably been a couple other Pokemon books. Noticeably, I'm not seeing any Pokemon books here. The way they're depicting the cards are as packs instead of as cards. I think kids would very much want to see every single Pokemon card available, and that's very hard, certainly, to display without taking up a massive amount of space. But it would be something you'd try to do. Not seeing a lot of clothes. I know there was a ton of clothes. Not seeing any bed sheets. I know there's a ton more dolls and things. Of course, you never know. This may be only a small fraction of what the National Video Game Museum has in their back storage. Yeah, it could be they could have a huge warehouse of other stuff and they're going to cycle things in and out, or they have no warehouse and this is all they have at the moment. I assume they're going to grow. There's no Pokemon food, which that would be very hard to find. Pokemon cereal, candy, there are things like that existed. I know I probably have at least a cereal or something like that. Definitely room for more shirts and pants and shoes. Pokemon Fever was crazy for at least 8 years, I would say, from its launch, and it never really died down to a massive amount. So yeah, there's still, just with this one picture. Now, inherently, this is also the this is the problem with just having one picture. This is a collection that was donated, I guess, or in collaboration with, is all they really are saying, with this Leon Hart, who is an actor, voice actor, real life Pokemon master, founder of Rare Candy. I don't know what Rare Candy is. He's followed by a couple of people. So somebody big, somebody that had their own collection. And inherently, I imagine that is how the National Video Game Museum is just going to grow and grow and grow, is that you're going to have more collectors saying, I'm tired of collecting, or I want this to be seen by more people. Let me get it into the National Video Museum and see if the National Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas can handle it. And with every new exhibit that the National Video Game Museum proves they can handle, they will attract the attention of more collectors who will want to see their collections in the museum too. And then collectors will also just kind of die out of old age, and that'll be a thing. So I would talk about this, but really it's time for a bathroom break, so I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So we were talking about one thing Nintendo hates, which is the preservation of games in a way that they don't control. This, in the case of Nintendo's own Japanese museum, which has been seemingly delayed, or in the case of Nintendo, very much fighting against libraries having digital archives of any of their games, or just in general Nintendo not having direct, complete control over what their history is at all. And Nintendo, I'm sure, would love to have us all forget about Conker's Bad Fur Day and some of their flop games, certainly. So, moving from that one thing Nintendo hates, let's move to the other thing Nintendo hates. Unofficial PC ports of Nintendo 64 games could get to be made a lot easier. The N64 recompiled program could be capable of turning a Nintendo 64 game into a, I guess this would be not 8086 but AMD 64 EXE program, something that would run on a 64-bit computer, which is what people with PCs are running, unless they're running Macs, which they say Macs are not PCs, so whatever. There. So any Windows computer, and very possibly any Linux computer running Wine or ProtonDB. The bigger suggestion would be ProtonDB, either running SteamOS on the Steam Deck, or Chimera OS would be my suggestion if you were going to build your own PC that runs on Linux, which increasingly with the crappiness of Windows 11, I think we will just see a lot of people opting to buy computers that just have a Linux version. If Linux can game, if Chimera OS can do as good as SteamOS, a lot of people would be happy. But yeah, I'm getting a little off topic here. So, what are the benefits of recompiling a Nintendo 64 ROM into an EXE? The benefits are you are now having translated native code running native commands to your processor. Things will go smoother, faster, as every little hiccup gets eliminated through optimization. All of a sudden you'll have Nintendo 64 games running at their original frame rates and much higher. It also opens up the door, certainly for a reason, to inject new code into a recompiled ROM, in the sense that if you have, say, Ocarina of Time, if you injected new code to put 2K textures into it, 4K textures into it, that would be something that was never really in the game originally, but nothing's going to really stop you as much once you have it recompiled. You could also inject new code to randomize the game, fix bugs, improve the game in some way. And I would like to see modders get creative, but inherently when you look at mods, it usually is just, can I fix this game so maybe the graphics look a little bit better, so it doesn't crash as much, or so it fixes one very large annoyance. Certainly when I'm looking at like Fallout New Vegas, the mods I would recommend are the things that would improve the interior brightness, improve the graphics overall, although frankly New Vegas looks pretty great for its age, improves crashiness. I wouldn't want to see Fallout New Vegas changed that much. If there is no New Game Plus in New Vegas, by default, having a New Game Plus probably is helpful. Starting in a different city, being allied to a certain faction might give you a good reason to play a second time. But right now, I'm not really seeing a reason why people want to play New Vegas a second time. Like, I just don't think there's that good of a content. But that doesn't have anything to do with Nintendo 64 games, does it? So back on topic. What I'd really like to see here is one of the things that modders always start with is they focus on the low-hanging fruit. the games people really want to play and the games that are still in line to be optimized. So inherently, that does bring you to Ocarina of Time over and over again. Although, actually, I think this might be Majora's Mask that we're looking at in this screenshot. The harder games, the less known games, I'm hoping with this recompiled effort would get more love and more support. And if you can decompile a Nintendo 64 game, there's nothing really stopping somebody from taking a tool to recompile it into, say, a ARM executable, a Linux executable designed for ARM chips like the Raspberry Pi or cell phones. And that at that point, we might finally cross this barrier where it was just requiring too much processing power to emulate Nintendo 64 games, to the point where we might just have fully recompiled versions of Nintendo 64 ROMs that run perfectly on Raspberry Pi 5s, maybe even Raspberry Pi 4s and 3s, and run very nicely on cell phones too. That would be an intriguing twist of this tool. The one thing there is it probably would only light a path as far as the next consoles. The PlayStation 1s, the PlayStation 2s. PlayStation 3 is going to be a nightmare to try and emulate. So recompiling PlayStation 3 games in particular could be super helpful, but you'd almost certainly need a completely different tool to do that for every single system. But that may just be the way to go, is stop trying to make emulator software that will emulate the newer systems and just start to effectively have fan efforts to remaster and remake old games. Meanwhile, Nintendo will probably do none of this and be inspired in no way to do this themselves. It automatically recompiles Nintendo 64 binaries into C code in a fraction of the time. Which, yeah. If they are binaries, that would mean effectively they are in assembler code, or very close to assembler code. So you literally would have like 0x0000001, and then on AMD 64 you would have to replace that 0x0000001 with 002. That's probably not an accurate example, but something like that. It would just be binary lines, and each line is going to either be a function or a value that would be copied over, and the values probably don't have to be changed at all unless you're translating from like left-sided big endianness or right-sided little endianness as to how you write the code. I think almost everything is big endian though, so that probably wouldn't be the case. The other thing here certainly is this is going to be fairly technical, although this YouTuber Nero, who I do follow and see occasionally, probably has dumbed it down and probably hyped it up a little bit more than it really is. The hope here, and this is really, I think, all this you can take from this is to make this newsworthy, is that we will start to see a list grow very quickly of all of the 300 or 400 Nintendo 64 games that were ever made getting recompiled. But it doesn't change the laws in any way, so if you were pirating from some dark website through a VPN to get ROMs for Nintendo 64 because you weren't ripping the ROMs from your own cartridges. You maybe now download the recompiled versions instead, which I imagine people will do it. I doubt you're going to want to do the recompilation yourself, because very quickly I think they probably would have some tweaks and adjustments there that smarter people would know how to do it to make kind of the perfect recompiled versions of those games. It is also worth pointing out that none of these games would have ever been designed to support mods, so any mod is going to be much more difficult to make compared to a Bethesda game that is designed around mods so that they can have the players improve the game instead of them. We can see that they've already done Banjo-Kazooie, Rocket Robot on Wheels, and Superman 64. Glover was a Nintendo 64 game that was released on Steam about a year ago, and it got very poor reviews for however it was being emulated. So PC gamers may find that on Steam officially, where you can legitimately buy it, we will see not Nintendo games, but games made for the Nintendo 64 from third-party developers getting recompiled and getting re-released. I could easily see somebody like Night Dive Studio focusing heavily on that. And I don't know if there really is any real legality to it. Technically here, converting binaries into C code is not circumventing DRM for Nintendo 64, because as far as I know, there is no digital rights management on a Nintendo 64 game. So on that one reason that you might violate the very long list of reasons you might violate copyright in the DMCA, you can possibly get around that. But yeah, there's still plenty of other ways Nintendo would sue people if they can catch them. So what's the other aspect to this? This decompiler program, if it is wise, should be hidden and not on a GitHub repository on github.com, because we know for a fact that Nintendo is going after anything they don't like on GitHub, and since Microsoft owns GitHub and wants to be friendly with Nintendo and just and protect their own copyrights, they will take that down. So one would hope that the way to actually get these recompilers are on different websites. You can use the Git versioning software without using GitHub. So there are other sites certainly for that, where at a certain point there probably should just be a pirate GitHub or git.pirate or something like that. Maybe some site like that exists and I just don't know about it. Anyways, we always have to applaud, though, the evolution of computer science. This is the one way in which computer science is very much like other sciences, in that there is room for discoveries and improvements and learning new things and developing new techniques. But yeah, it'll probably be a long time before any of this impacts in your average gamer, or even has any major revolutionary effect when it comes to the world of improving emulators. There is always the possibility, too, that this recompiled effort gets superseded by another recompile program that does it even better and runs more optimization. It is worth mentioning that when you compile what is the C code, the human readable English language of C code or C# code when making a game, when you run that through a compiler, there are several different layers in which it can debug and optimize your code. This recompiler is probably taking code that was optimized for the Nintendo 64, which was its own unique piece of hardware, and converting it to what would almost certainly be incredibly unoptimized code for a PC. So there is definitely a question there as far as just what level of optimization can it do and automatically detect, if any. If you can put more optimization in the recompiling of the Nintendo 64 code, the code will run even faster. At a certain point, maybe you don't need the code to run any faster. Maybe it runs at 4K at a lock to 144 Hertz perfectly fine. That is a possibility too. We shall see. This is exciting new news, and it is the great kind of news to get compared to so many stories of layoffs and just negativity around the game industry this year. So let's get back to the negativity. Square Enix has confirmed its canceled games which don't fit its new development strategy. We kind of already knew that. They said that to shareholders. We kind of assumed that. It's very possibly the right move for Square Enix. Square Enix is struggling to find its own captain, effectively. They've had really bad management in the past, and maybe there hasn't been a major shift in who the managers are, but it seems like there's a small chance that managers have shifted in their attitudes, and hopefully they can go in a new direction and make better games and find happiness within themselves in a lot of ways with the games they make. Although there's no guarantee of that. It may very well be the case that this is just them still being very rudderless and going in circles. But yeah. Publisher had previously suggested it would be canceling projects but wasn't specific about the details. It was expected to report content abandonment losses. Yeah. Profits went down nearly 70% from the previous year, partly due to the recognition of $141 million in losses of disposal of content and just canceling games, effectively. Yeah. Apparently, there are plans to aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy where Square Enix games, they probably are going to be targeting the Switch 2 and the PlayStation a lot more instead of exclusively the PlayStation. I doubt they're, as a Japanese company, really going to try and target the Xbox. Maybe they're going to target PC a little bit more too. And who knows if this plan isn't heavily being influenced by the fact that there just isn't anyone who is permanently in charge of Sony Interactive Entertainment at the moment, and there's just that interim boss. Maybe some relationships eroded because of that. Or maybe they strengthened, who knows. The new strategy is being titled as Square Enix Reboots and Awakens, which definitely sounds like a Final Fantasy title. AAA Games multi-platform going forward and revamp of its internal development process to bring more capabilities in-house instead of outsourcing to third parties. So yeah, very much they want to have the Japanese employees in-house to learn probably newer engines and newer coding styles to make modern games, which is going to put a huge amount of pressure on those employees. We'll see if the employees can do it or not. It is very common for Japanese companies to put a huge amount of pressure on their employees. So Their two focuses is multiplayer and revamping internal development processes, and canceled projects didn't fit within these strategies in particular, suggesting they may have been either tied to a single platform, which would that would feel like more mobile games or Switch only games, or they relied too heavily on external developers, which we really don't have any clue how many external developers Square Enix was really relying on. At a certain level, we don't even really know if, in Square Enix's eyes, they had projects still in development for, like, the Hitman series, the Lara Croft series, some of those companies that they sold off of the Deus Ex series. It might very well be just on the books that they still had some teams there still working on some code for those games, and all of that may have been part of the cancellations. Otherwise, who knows? And we'll just have to wait and see. Project by project review of continued development feasibility found that these particular efforts to be incompatible with the group's revised approach to the development of high definition games, HD games. That's crazy to be calling games high definition games, unless this is being used as a phrase to specifically exclude mobile games, saying that they canceled a bunch of mobile games. And it certainly is that Japanese mentality, as far as we want everything done one way and one way only. We want every single person to be the same. Whereas a more United States Western company might be more permissive, maybe too permissive in the case of Microsoft, where you might have one team that develops games on one engine in one way, and then another team develops games on a completely different engine and in a completely different attitude and style and way in which games are developed. And one company might be making games exclusively for mobile, and one company in Microsoft might be making games for just Xbox and not multi-platform. Is it really a case that one size fits all for the video game world? Probably not, but it would be one way to restart things at Square Enix, certainly, is to say we want everything to start afresh and start anew on a new engine, on a new multi-platform strategy. I think one of the lessons to probably learn in Japan in particular is that they can no video game company can lean on just releasing a game on the Switch or just releasing the game on a PlayStation. You kind of need to do both, and more you kind of need to release it on PC too. Both Nintendo and Sony have been problems in the past when that was the only console you were releasing a game on. Sony more recently, much more of a case. Yeah, I doubt any of these decisions have too much to do with Sony's censorship and, you know, the whole Stellar Blade issue, which nobody's talking about Stellar Blade now. That game came and went very quickly. But I definitely think Square Enix saw the censorship issues that have happened around Stellar Blade and other things, and they've seen the Helldivers issue requiring PlayStation Network after the fact and delisting games on Steam. And I imagine Square Enix wants to insulate itself from that kind of volatility. So here is a continuation on that. It's making games AAA platform. Now, I vaguely recall they already said though that the Final Fantasy VII reboot, third game in the trilogy, is still going to be a Sony exclusive. So you can kind of exclude this screenshot. I think this is a mistake. It may very well be a case that Square Enix is not seeing anywhere as many sales as they would like. around the Square Enix, the Final Fantasy VII reboot, by being a Sony exclusive, and they may be blaming Sony for that. Although, in reality, I think their expectations were probably just too high. I have heard that a large number of people dropped off by the time the second game was even released because there was just a little too much grinding in it. Square Enix reboot, or the Final Fantasy VII reboot in particular, is a great example of what I'm trying to say while I'm covering Fallout New Vegas, in that Fallout New Vegas, as a game that came out in 2009, 2010, is absolutely not a good game by 2024 standards. It just doesn't respect the player's time. It's just way too grindy. It's way too slow. It's got way too many systems in it. JRPGs have all of those problems in spades. And if you are going to properly remake a Japanese RPG, you're going to have to speed up the overall flow of the game significantly to respect the player's time, to respect the players are just not willing to grind as much. Players are probably a little bit worse these days at any specific game because they're not going to practice on any specific game. They're going to play a wide variety of games and be more of a jack of all trades but a master of none. And game developers are going to have to accommodate for that. Square Enix's expectations are probably way too high anyways, but for a Final Fantasy VII remake, unless something that could be spoiled happened that was really amazing, it's hard to convince people to play 1/3 of a game, then wait a couple years, play the second third of the game, then wait a couple years, and play a third of the game. I think once all 3 games have come out, you will probably have people going back and playing all 3 in the long haul and get sales for decades later. But Square Enix only seems to, like most companies, probably only cares about that initial launch window of sales. When you take Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy Online, Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, and the most recent Final Fantasy game 16, which that did very poorly. If you take those off the table, I don't think I can name another Square Enix game. Yeah, I know others exist, but I don't think I could tell you an actual name of any of them. You will potentially run into a problem, Square Enix will, in particular, in that the people who make the Final Fantasy games and Square Enix games and all are more artistes, as it were, artists, and telling an artist that their game has to be multi-platform when the artists themselves may not want to make it multi-platform might backfire, or telling their artist to learn new ways to program a game or animate a game, or just direct people who are programming and animating the game might backfire in particular. At a certain level, you kind of have to baby the artist for the hope of the art coming out of their minds. That's always been the case with artists. So I don't think you can just treat the artistic minds behind Final Fantasy games like your average Japanese grunt worker. And they may be trying to do that, and they may very well see all of their creative directors and creative contributors leaving Square Enix. Which, from my perspective, that's probably for the better anyways. Square Enix probably should just collapse and shut down, because their management has mishandled things so much already. I think they're past the point in which they can be forgiven, or that I could personally hope for them to succeed. Moving on, Assassin's Creed Shadows release date and DLC details have seemingly leaked. Now, I don't know of a game called Assassin's Creed Shadows. And weirdly, this is labeled as an official cinematic world premiere trailer, which when you put the word cinematic in the name, it makes me think that this is a movie, not a video game. But yeah, I guess this was known as Codename Red. And see if this video is still here. Nope, it premieres in 40 hours. It's a premiere video. So yeah, I have no idea what Assassin's Creed Shadows is, but it sounds like it might finally be a ninja Assassin's Creed game. Which, at this point, they could do anything with Assassin's Creed for all I care. I've lost complete interest in the series. Let's see, Gearbox has announced Homeworld 3 now being available for Steam and Epic Game Store. So at least that's something as far as Gearbox is publishing or releasing something and not just staying in a stasis after being acquired by, I believe it was 2K Games. Now, I know Homeworld as a series, the name is recognizable, but I could not really tell you anything about what kind of game it is. From the looks of it, it might be a space real-time strategy game, maybe with some kind of alien space antagonists or multiple factions. For all I know, this could just be a 3D StarCraft game, or it's probably the wrong comparison now. So yeah, space battles. I've always had a bit of a bias that I recognize in that I've never really found space games to be particularly fun. The 4X style, particularly in space games, feels overwhelming to me. 4X being, let's see, extract, explore, exploit, or something like that. It's just resource management speak. Maybe there's an idea that these ships can only teleport because they're so big, and then the smaller ships have to be inside the larger ships. Looking at this trailer, it looks alright, but I'm so out of my own depth here, I have no idea how to compare this to even the other space games. All I can really say is something pretty stupid like, well, it doesn't look like Borderlands, and it probably wasn't made by the same team that made Borderlands, and leave it at that. I don't even know what these U-tunes from Risk of Rain. Oh, I guess these are from a game called Risk of Rain. So we've got a lot of Homeworld stuff. And here's Raku Gaki getting reposted. Meanwhile, the more Borderlands thing was on May 3rd, as far as the movie getting retweeted. But that is, I guess, a small bit of hope as far as the longevity of Gearbox, that they are retweeting this Homeworld game, which, yeah, legendary spacefaring real-time strategy, developed by BBL Games and published by Gearbox Official. So at least they're publishing games. Although you could also take it as maybe they are just finishing all of their publishing obligations as far as Gearbox Publishing is concerned, and Gearbox Software and Gearbox Entertainment are wrapping up and not doing anything. It is also worth pointing out that Gearbox Publishing I believe is still owned by Embracer Group, whereas Gearbox Software and Gearbox Entertainment were, I believe, acquired by 2K. And it seems like they are just sharing their Twitter account, which that's got to be an awkward thing, I'm sure. We do have a little bit of Fallout news. Fallout 4 has added new graphics and performance options for the PS5, Xbox Series X and S. This is the second update. I assume some of this is to fix the fact that the graphics options were just not working on some of the consoles. Seems like it's not doing anything for PC. And you have an opportunity here to choose 30, 40, or 60 frame rate targets. Which the only reason I could imagine you would target 40 is if targeting 40 just guarantees you 30, but that would still be highly odd frame pacing. And I guess I would say I question if we're going to see 120, 144 hertz on the next generation of consoles, unless we get some new technology that's very cheap. If anything, I think the next generation of consoles might do better just reducing their prices and going for bargain basement styles of selling things. Xbox in particular might choose that. And then Minecraft is continuing to do its very weird let's hire artists to advertise Minecraft. Which, yeah, you hire these artists, they have unique art styles, they're not going to really match with the idea of Minecraft. Here is just making a mosaic using tiles, which Minecraft is not mosaics, it's voxel based and pixels. It's a unique idea to paint inside the edges of a mosaic as a concept. But yeah, that definitely doesn't scream Minecrafty to me. Just throwing away money to famous artists for an advertisement campaign that seems to literally only exist online. I haven't seen any commercials for it, not that I'm watching TV to see commercials. But yeah, the question to ask here is, who is your target audience with this commercial? Is it art fans, adult art fans? Yeah, I have no idea. Minecraft / Microsoft seems to be wasting some funds there. We already kind of talked about this, where Red Dead Redemption could finally be coming to PC. The game was originally released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2010. And that's certainly where a recompile effort, the next generation of recompile or emulation efforts are going to come, is can we recompile code for the PlayStation 3, which is a unique cell processor code to run on a standard AMD 64 computer, whereas you probably don't have to do as much with the Xbox 360 because the Xbox 360 itself is basically an AMD 64 computer already. There was a large number of games that were PS3 exclusive that are uniquely trapped in that they are not backward compatible for the PlayStation 4 or 5. A lot of the times when you're putting every time you put a PS3 disc into a PS4 or PS5, it's going to just have you download a newer compiled version for the PS4 and PS5. It can't emulate the PS3 at all. And then the early versions of the PS3 could emulate PS2s by having entire PS2 hardware built in. But yeah, there's no compatibility with that, I think, either. I don't believe you can put a PS1 or a PS2 disc into a PS4 or PS5 and get a game to play that way. Notably, nobody cares about the fact that the PS4s and 5s can play Blu-rays. The other problem you're going to run into, though, is still some confusion. Because Red Dead Redemption, I think, is technically the sequel to Red Dead Revolution. And so Red Dead Redemption 2 is technically the third game in the series. And I don't think that game is available on PC either. And of course, anytime you bring over a 2010 game, it's going to feel like a 2010 game, so it's going to be a hard sell. But I do like the direction that this suggests the gaming community is going in, and that we will potentially have almost every game available for purchase and play on Steam or on PC in a near future if we get lucky. There will be a few exceptions. There will still be a few things that just need to be pirated because nobody's willing to bother to remake them, but that list is getting smaller and smaller. And at some point that may just turn the tide against consoles completely. If getting a Steam Deck to play way more games is just a better offer, we might see Microsoft and PlayStation and even Nintendo just putting their games on Steam and not bothering to try and take a loss on hardware sales that could be only recouped by getting every single person who buys a Switch to buy at least 3 to 6 games. Here's some other good news. Apparently Warner Bros. Has U-turned on the decision to delist indie games published by Adult Swim, although I do question if maybe Adult Swim, the animation studios, and the TV channel might get severely slimmed down. Developers were told in March that their games were going to be taken down. I feel like maybe this is a thing where Warner Brothers realized that if they delisted the games, then they would probably have to hand the rights over to subsidiaries or other people who worked on the games, and then have the games relisted by somebody other than Warner Brothers. And I bet Warner Brothers didn't like the thought of that. Or the other option is that now that AT&T owns Warner Brothers, maybe they just don't really have any clear leadership, and so they made a decision. There was a little bit of pushback, and now they're undoing that decision. Probably a good move. Overall, it was probably a dumb move to delist a game in the first place. Yet they more than likely are still making money on these games. This is potentially a great contrast of the way Square Enix is doing things, where Square Enix is willing to go all the way to the end and write off $141 million in losses by canceling games and delisting games effectively before they're even listed, whereas Warner Brothers gets even the smallest amount of pushback and U-turns. Now, most gamers would say we'd like to see games companies listen to gamers and do U-turns on even the smallest amount of pushback. At a certain point, maybe we would get to a point where the gaming community and game development was almost 100% mob rule and fairly close to anarchy, but yeah, the difference between anarchy, mob rule, and democracy is fairly close, so probably is better that companies do fear a little pushback, although there's a lot of times where people don't like that either, where you have companies bending over backwards so that they can virtue signal so they won't get canceled or have campaigns launched against them to cancel them, and nobody really likes that either. There was a meme that was put on Reddit that I saw just yesterday where it was showing all of the original game developers from decades previously saying something like, I programmed this game on 32 kilobytes of RAM, or this game was designed to run without ever needing a patch or having any way to get a patch, like very positive things for old programmers. And then there was a whole other section where it was programmers now, and it's like, this game requires 500 gigabytes and there's going to be a 500 gigabyte update on day one, or this game is full of microtransactions, or this game is a single player game that requires you to be always online. Which, yeah, it's a meme. It's not really designed to be a fair argument. It is very much straw man, strong manning. Strong man some characters, straw man some other characters. But it does feel right, and that's the thing about a lot of memes, is you can get propaganda and get things that just feel right, when technically, if you were to compare apples to apples, the truth is different. But yeah, we certainly have a lot more talk and a lot more reporting when you have developers doing awful things like microtransactions or 500 gigabyte files filling up your hard drives, or always online DLC for single player content. So that highlights why it's important to always say, good job on Warner Brothers for being forced to come to your senses and not delist a game just because it wasn't part of your plans. Now, the next step would be to actually support Adult Swim to make more games, if that's a good direction to go into. And I would think it would be. Like, inherently, if Warner Brothers has Adult Swim, then they should be delving the entirety of the original intellectual property that Adult Swim has done to make games on it. It is somewhat crazy that they didn't jump on the bandwagon to make a Rick and Morty game that was literally labeled Rick and Morty for consoles. They only made Pocket Mortys, to my knowledge, which is a mobile game, just Pokemon with Rick and Morty characters, and not even really good Pokemon clone. But yeah, I know there was a game that had the voice actor from Rick and Morty that was weird, like Rick and Morty, that came out, but it didn't have Rick and Morty labeled on it. And certainly, despite the controversies around Rick and Morty, I think you could see Venture Brother games being made. You could certainly look on the long list of things Adult Swim has done and make little games, single A games, double A games, mobile games. Just do a lot more with that. It's not like Warner Brothers has anything else going for them at this point. It's either do this or do nothing, as far as I can tell. TT Games and their Lego games, I assume they're still making Lego games. Warner Brothers, the movie studio, has announced a new Lord of the Rings movie called, I believe it's called The Hunt for Golem. So, I'm not sure really where that would play in the timeline, but that definitely highlights how the Golem game that they were hoping would have been a success and failed miserably from Daedalic very likely was a game that they were hoping would lead towards a movie called The Hunt for Golem. And so their focus as far as Lord of the Rings is probably very Golem-centric. Golem or Gollum, however you want to pronounce it. Still not really sure what Little Kitty Big City is, but on title alone I imagine it sold a few copies, and in total it has topped 100,000 sales in 2 days. And this is a great example of a game that should have some level of highlight on my charts, but very possibly will never be able to be highlighted because it will be a game that maybe sells 100,000 in 2 days, 300,000 in the first week, maybe even 1 million in the first couple of weeks, but then people likely will forget about it and it would drop down. So if a game spiked at a high number like Palworld did when it first came out and then drops to a very low number within a few weeks, at the end of the year when I'm trying to do an end of year wrap up, I have no way of really seeing that on a chart. And so on my current chart, I need to figure out how to make my chart do better in that case, or present that information. In that case, my chart is presenting different information, so I need a different chart. It is also being speculated that a new Doom game could be revealed at the Xbox Showcase in June. If they did that, that would be fairly smart on Microsoft's part, because then you could shift the conversation away from them shutting down a bunch of companies. You could even have some Microsoft fanboys defending Microsoft's laying off and shuttering companies as being necessary for the next Doom game. All they really have to do is show a fairly interesting trailer. You are running into the third game in what one would assume is a trilogy as far as the Doom series goes. So you probably are looking for kind of a bigger revitalization of the next Doom game. Although we really are at a point where we should stop having trilogies and we should really just have one game and a sequel, and then if a third game shows up in the series, just consider that the new game, and then there's going to be likely a sequel after that. It seems like Microsoft, if this is true, would do wise to try to have Doom games coming out every couple of years, balance it out, have 1 year where Doom is very well received, have 1 year where Call of Duty is really received, start to mix the engines a little bit, mix the teams a little bit, then you have realistic military first-person shooter game, and then you have hyper gory, bloody demon slaying game, feeling and playing very similarly, or at least being targeted to the same audience. Very much that is what Microsoft could revert to, is that we are the company that makes Call of Duty, Doom, and Halo. We are the first-person shooter master of that craft. It would be interesting though if this leak listed any other games, because yeah, I just don't think I would be that interested. If they're saying it may be titled Doom Year Zero, which maybe implies that it is going to be a full remake of the events of the original Doom game, which canonically did take place. So the Doom 2016 reboot is supposed to be a sequel to the events of at least Doom 1 and Doom 2, maybe even Doom 3, whichever version of the two versions of Doom 3. So they would be in kind of a good point to go back and say, with the new engine, could we take the general story, what little there is of the original Doom game, and make a new game called Doom Year Zero? Would that work? That might also allow you to remove some of the more powerful weapons from Doom Guy and keep the power creep down a little bit, and also buy you some time to make a proper third game in the chronology. And I don't think anybody really wants any major story around Doom, so you don't really want that major kind of change. I think if anything, that was probably a problem with Halo, is once Halo stopped being about just shooting aliens and started to have a bunch more story twists and elements to it, I think you lost some of the fandom there. Plus I just think the games and the gameplay started to be less focused on. Whereas if they had just said Doom 2 or Halo 2 was going to be exactly like Halo 1, and this, you were just always going to end in the same place you started, not really changing the status quo. That might make a lot of sense. Doom, same thing. Status quo probably shouldn't change too much. Should just be that there's always demons, and there's always a new horde to kill of demons, and there's always Doom Guy. What you don't want to do here is try and make a Doom sequel that is starring the two daughters of Doom Guy and doesn't even show the Doom Guy, and then you're playing as completely different characters in a completely different game style. If you're not getting the reference I'm making, that is what the Wolfenstein series did in a spin-off game. 2 spin-off games. The one was in VR, which noticeably they haven't announced that third Wolfenstein game where you're finally gonna fight Mecha Hitler, and I'm not sure they're ever actually going to do that. So the Wolfenstein series may very well have painted itself into a corner in which they can't do anything with it, despite it's being received very well. Moving on, the Australian studio Mighty Kingdom is laying off 28% of the staff. I don't like in headlines when they use the full word percent instead of just a symbol. Headlines are supposed to be abbreviated and shortened. Yep. I heard a YouTuber saying that Australia, or somebody on Reddit I think, was saying that Australia's economy doesn't seem like it's doing great. Whose is really, but there might be very much some delayed depression economics hitting Australia from things like the just overall economic situation in the world, wars, COVID, take your pick. There's a long list of reasons. Australia being so far away from every other country, their economy, being a world economy alone, must be incredibly difficult. Yeah. And I'll just leave it at that speculation and move on. Godot has retweeted this YouTuber who's back to making YouTube videos, Brackies, with his second video, which is how to use GD script in 1 hour. GD script is the scripting language and programming language you use to write Godot programs. I'm not sure that there is a way in Godot to see to write C# code or C code. One thing about Brackies too is I think he's bilingual, but maybe not a 100% English speaker, and so a lot of what he's saying I think is maybe getting prompted to him from a teleprompter. He probably knows what he's saying, but he's probably having to translate it from his native language to English, and yet he's still a pretty good presenter from the looks of it. But yeah, his Hello Again video had 1 million views, and then how to make a video game in Godot beginner tutorial had 677,000 views, and that was 2 weeks ago. Let's see if we can just quickly highlight what the Godot script, GD script, looks like. It looks to me, without, let's see if we can magnify this. There. Looks like it is functional, maybe even a little bit like Rust. Not too different from what you would do in, let's jump ahead. Yeah, it doesn't look too different from what you would do in C# anyways. The one thing I think to really point out here, when looking at this code is that this is the kind of text, very basically, you should expect to be writing if you're going to program a game in Godot script or anything else. It is not going to be a drag and drop Lego Scratch data type experience. It's weird. Why would you use these shapes as a indicator of something? Like a Boolean value being a triangle. Well, Boolean value can be true, false, or undefined. So I guess maybe that's a triangle, but an integer value as a square doesn't make any sense at all. Now, what you won't see here is that there's more of a Python style as far as what they're doing, in that you're not being asked to put a semicolon at the end of any of the commands. So, yeah. And typecasting seems to work like I would expect it to work. I'm not going to watch all of this. See if there's anything interesting later on in the code. Nope, not anything super interesting. But anyways, yeah. If you want to get into game programming and game development, I'd highly recommend watching Bracky's tutorials. It's going to be a good starting point. Inherently, I do think if you're a kid, you're going to be offered C++ or C# programming at best, and you should take that, and that will give you the foundation on concepts. You are probably going to have to relearn GD script on your own after the fact. So spend a semester doing C++, spend a year doing C++, spend 2 years, 3 years, go all the way to a bachelor's degree on C++, then learn GD script on your own. That would be my suggestion. Avoid pitfalls. Don't think that a JavaScript class or a HTML class or a Scratch class or even a Python class is going to get you very far in programming. Those are good introductory classes and supplemental classes, but they are not the good foundation you really want. It's probably better to take those classes after doing at least a year of C++, C# programming. C++ and C# coding will get you the best education to run any kind of programming, not just video games, which will give you the opportunity to work outside of the video game industry and get paid and treated a lot better, which is always nice to at least have that fallback option. If your school system is so bad that they're not offering at least a C++ class, then obviously you're going to have to take whatever programming class you can get, and don't be afraid to learn it online, because you may very well find that the teachers who are teaching the programming classes in your school system might be terrible. They might not know what they're talking about. They might be teaching you very basic things and treating them like they're a hugely helpful bit of information. They may take a year to teach you to do something that your class should have learned in a month. You never know. So don't be disheartened if you find that the classroom experience in the school system isn't great. There's plenty of online tutorials these days that can help you relearn it. A lot of times people used to learn from books. A lot of those books were written fairly poorly or inaccurately even. A lot of times books are very old and they're just not up to the date. It's important to point out that the Godot engine and as such GD script is getting updates fairly frequently, every couple of weeks. So there may just be a new function added at any point that would make programming a lot easier. I still think that whether it gets used or not is uncertain, but it wouldn't be a terrible idea to also learn Rust. There's a lot of hype and talk around Rust, and people will ooh and ah if you can say you know how to program programs in Rust. Although learning Rust will confuse you if you're also learning C++ and C#, which C++ and C# are close enough together that you could study both of those at the same time. Same is true for Python. You probably shouldn't be learning Python or JavaScript. You shouldn't be learning JavaScript at all. And yeah, if you wanted to make mobile games, the JavaScript replacement that Android uses, which I think is called Coddle, it might have a different name, I wouldn't bother with learning that either. Because Godot games can be ported directly to mobile. And thus, if you're going to make a program and any chance you're going to use Godot, learn to make the program in Godot, and then it will automatically be compiled to run on Android phones. And I think Apple phones too, and PC games, AMD 64 applications also, and I think maybe even something else, although I don't know what that third thing would really be. But that's enough recommendation as far as brackeys. Yeah. The one thing I think might be slightly concerning is Brackeys has now made 2 1-hour videos, which really are just going to be introductions to it, and they may not be introductions to programming enough as much as they may just be introductions to programming using Godot with the assumption that you already know how to program. Yeah. I also would recommend don't have too high of hopes about working in the video game industry after seeing all these layoffs. Think of it more as something that you could do as a career or you could do as a hobby and have backup skills and opportunities in other fields. Some business management skills and classes will do anyone pretty well. Accounting skills and classes, things like that. Those kinds of jobs are less likely to disappear than game development jobs. Here we have kind of contradictory headlines. It looks like Warner Brothers is returning Adult Swim published games back to the developers, which, yeah, I'm not sure which one of these two statements are true, or if maybe both of them are true. Yeah. But yeah, it would at least make a little bit more sense if WB doesn't want to manage the games, that they would return them to the developers. And I think the developers themselves might have legal right to sue if the publisher is delisting the game and then not giving the rights back to the developer, because almost certainly that would have been pre-negotiated in their contract. Otherwise, they would have signed a very poor contract. It does bring about an interesting question about, does the United States court system have a desire to see all games available for sale and purchase and trying to make profit at all times? Yeah, and there might be a case there where they could make an argument that it's better for society for products to always be available for purchase, and a freedom of speech does not extend to a company who is actively and maliciously delisting their games and hurting a developer. That'd be an interesting argument to make. It probably hasn't succeeded or been made yet. This was also retweeted by Neil Mohan, the CEO of YouTube. But it says YouTube's secret weapon to win the TV streaming wars is its top creators. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that headline, and I'll leave it at that. I also think, well, as much as I do occasionally enjoy a good Mythical Morning video, a lot of the videos are garbage and pointless and silly, and these two guys are just getting older and older, and eventually they're gonna just have to retire, and they know it, and that's why they're bringing in spork.com and Good Mythical Kitchen and having spin-offs and things like that. But yeah, when you look at Good Mythical Morning, a significant amount of their content is just replicating what other people have done, smaller creators have done, basically stealing their ideas these days, or asking the audience to think of ideas for themselves. There is no creative through line, as mean as it sounds, around Rhett and Link in Good Mythical Morning. The only creativity they occasionally do is when they write an album or write a comic book, which is more from on their Rhett and Link channel, which is not their main success channel. And certainly Good Mythical Morning has just encouraged the algorithm to recommend more lower effort content on YouTube, and it really almost certainly has hurt the quality of content on YouTube. But yeah, on the other hand, to be fair, this is a longer article than you ever would see from a video game news site. This is, I believe, from Hollywood Reporter.com. If you are going to try and have YouTube be a streaming TV provider, that is a very different type of content for a very different audience. I know for a fact, playing Fallout New Vegas, because the video is so dark, that anybody trying to watch that on a streaming TV set is probably not going to be able to see anything at all. But yeah, YouTube is just a different thing. Like, I cannot, even in my own mind, as a YouTube content creator, I cannot compare YouTube in any way to Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu or Disney Plus. None of those channels. The closest comparison I could see is that YouTube is somewhat close to the free ad-supported streaming channels, the fast channels, that would run old cartoons 24/7 and just show ads in between it. And there's nothing wrong with the fast channels, they just don't feel like proper TV, where it's appointment television, where new content and new seasons are being released. You could very easily see a Rhett and Link fast channel being made for a Chromecast, and it would just be 24/7 of Rhett and Link content. But yeah, if I want to sit down and watch something, I'm gonna open Amazon Prime. I'm gonna open Netflix. I'm not gonna open YouTube. If I want to be distracted and have something on my third screen, or if I'm just only trying to waste a few minutes, so I want to play things at twice the speed, then I'll go to YouTube. But I never go to YouTube for appointment television, high quality television. The only thing that's even slightly close to that is Taskmaster, which the only reason I'm watching Taskmaster on YouTube is because it's not available any other way really in the United States. And even that gets hurt in that some of the British shows, older British shows, are now on Amazon Prime. And yeah, there's a thing on Amazon Prime that I'm started watching, but I'm mostly just falling asleep halfway through it, called The Outer Range, I believe. And so I have spent some time watching that, but I don't think I've even wasted a lot of time doing that, because I'm mostly, again, just falling asleep to it. And then, why do we have Insomniac Games here? Well, this is an interesting depiction of a collection. Let's talk about this. So we saw the Pokemon collection at the National Video Game Museum. Here we have a probably office in Insomniac Games showing just Ratchet and Clank memorabilia. A statue like this, probably extremely fragile and difficult to move, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of a kind. Some of this art in the back here in this piano may not be actually Ratchet and Clank, but yeah, you've got some statues and things that would look very nice in a museum and being depicted with puck lights to light them up. Lighting is a major issue, certainly, even when you have these big glass things, glass cases. It's really still difficult to light things properly. I know my bookshelves in particular have that problem, and even here you're having fairly large amounts of shadows on the wall, just with one puck light. And it's not like you can just do LEDs and plug them in. The amount of current a lot of LEDs require makes the wiring a little bit more difficult. Yes, you can plug them in, but you may have to find a transformer box that's bigger than your average laptop transformer, and you may have to do it in layers. So I wouldn't be surprised if the lighting setup here was just this bulb, this bulb, this bulb, and this bulb goes to one line, and then this bulb, this bulb, this bulb, and this bulb goes to a second line, and then this bulb, this bulb, and this bulb goes to a third line. Maybe they are squeezing those all together here, but maybe there's 2 or 3 plugs getting plugged into it just for the amount of power. And I don't want to sound too much like Indiana Jones here, but this definitely is stuff that belongs in a museum. And here you see just like games and cases on the shelf, and I feel like that's fine enough. I don't think you need to encase it in plastic and do all of that. But yeah, unfortunately my magnifier's not really doing a great job highlighting all of this because it's too small, too unhelpful. And of course you can't make pictures any higher resolution, so you're going to get whatever blurry pixely image you get. There almost certainly will be a revolution that happens on the internet at some point where we're going to have an internet 5.0 where the images start to just be higher resolution, and that the internet is just designed with more scalable vector images and less bitmap images that are going to be small and pixely. Apparently Insomniac had its 30th anniversary. Here you can see more pictures of collections. Yeah, and they have this whole wall of text here that I thought might be them announcing that they were shutting down, which there's a real danger of doing a wall of text post on Steam, on Twitter these days, just because of all the shutdowns and layoffs. And yeah, I guess that is all I had to say about that. That was the last major tab. So let's now go through all the new games on Steam. There is, guess I'll give this a chance. This looks like a VR game. $25 for something that might be. Says is a true test from the French Air and Space Force turned into a sci-fi turn-based strategy game. So it's based on real science is what they're claiming. Dead Get Wrecked I think is too terrible of a name to give a chance to. Probably should be more critical to games based on your name. Now this was one thing I didn't work on, was the JavaScript delay before I changed the JavaScript to have all of the thumbnails switch way faster. Too many different art styles here for this game, so that one's out. Real Dive World. I don't think this supports English. Regardless, I don't think it's actually good. Yeah, it's trying to lure you in. I'm gonna say no to that. Here we have a horror Japanese game. This art style is reminiscent of an anime like Serial Experiments Lane to my eye, but I imagine there are some more recent horror games or horror anime that are also in that art style. I'm going to put this on the fault list for my own attention. That gory eyeball, something that maybe even YouTube would have a problem with. Here we have an RPG Maker game of no interest. This doesn't look good enough. Hidden objects. Now I am almost to the point where I've made all the most recent shorts and kind of caught up. I still don't really know if any of that is anywhere close as far as scheduling YouTube shorts and just the deluge. Inherently, every time I stream, I have way more than the 9 to 10 games I should be highlighting for that period of time. Yeah. Now I'm going to say no to Blissful Acres also. Difficult game about jumping. That's another one we can dismiss just by the name. Eternal Spring. Looks too weird. We may be seeing slightly better, slightly more. Is there anything here that would want me to give this a chance? I want to be generous and say yes, but I have to admit these screenshots are very lackluster, so no. Survival in the forest, but the forest is just this tiny square. No to that. Open the doors is too generic. That's gonna be a no. Yeah, it seems like we've got slightly higher than average amount of garbage games. We can say no to Backrooms games immediately. So yeah, there's still some programming I need to tweak more. I think I may have gotten a little bit better in the past few days about finding, if I only have an hour to work on something, that would be a good time to, I'll give this a chance, work on programming some of my macros and my code instead of trying to record a 2 hour to 2 hour and 30-minute episode of Fallout New Vegas, considering that is the direction the Fallout New Vegas episodes are going. They're just getting longer and longer, and yet almost every single time that I end a Fallout New Vegas episode, I feel like I've accomplished fairly little. Now, in particular, this looks like this is just an original Zelda parody game. I mean, why not? Why not give that a chance? It's probably nothing, but yeah. If you were a new programmer and you wanted to make something like the original Legend of Zelda game, why not just do that, other than the fact that nobody would ever possibly buy your game, because it would just look too old or look like a ROM hack. The thing that's concerning me is that the follow list cleanup still seems to not want to work when it's run with all the other macros in a row, which is weird because it then seems like it does work when it's run alone. And the same is true for the Gamatsu articles. I think I may have fixed that. Here we have another game that looks like it is. Well, if anything, I would say it's too all over the place with the visual styles. Like, I almost want to give it a chance, but no. It definitely feels to me, here's another adult game, lewd game. By every angle you can tell what they're going for here. Warning, the game may feel unfamiliar and complicated. The game cannot proceed by a simple dash. Yeah, so that probably means the game is programmed very poorly. Would be my guess. Solve puzzles in secret, I'll give that a chance. Prison fight simulator, I don't think we would give that a chance. Why would you want to simulate that? Here's one that's out and being rated very positively now. Yeah, this almost looks good now. I'll be generous and give that a chance as long as it supports English. Still really have never found a good Chinese game. I don't play enough games to be the jury on that. I haven't really played any Chinese game, but of my small efforts to put games on the fall list and see if they get reviews, I have not seen anything that has been a breakout hit, as my efforts to follow all the YouTube and video game news, not YouTube news, but I have not heard anyone sing the praises of any Chinese game. It is very much not the same situation as like Stellar Blade, because at least Stellar Blade was getting praised for a brief second there before it started censoring. Sony forced them into censoring content. And even now, I think if you sat someone down and say, give me your honest opinion about Stellar Blade, I imagine the reviews would be very popular still. This may very well be a case where, because Hades 2 in early access has been released, we're seeing a situation where there is nobody willing to release their games, if they're of any real quality, to compete with Hades 2. And if that's the case, I don't really have a way of knowing that information. Yeah. Here we can see Homeworld 3 is already mixed. I'm not even sure Homeworld 2 was well received. I'm certainly out of the loop as far as the Homeworld series. They are not pointing towards Homeworld 2 anywhere in their description here. So we should probably investigate that just for my own edification. Absolutely insane end-user license agreement terms, privacy policy. They give themselves license to collect data like first name, last name, email address, residential address, telephone number, photographic images if uploaded by user, credit card information if provided by a third-party payment processing, purchase list, shipping information, country, game, device identifier, screen name, demographic information. None of that seems that odd, frankly. None of that seems odd at all. If anything, this is just the standard terms to say, hey, we may get this information from somebody else, and by you agreeing to our terms, you can't sue us that we, through a third-party data broker, collected all this information. So I wouldn't think that that is a big issue. And maybe that's something. Cons, I dislike fear of missing out promotions. I dislike shift codes. I dislike Gearbox not optimized. Jeez. That's not a very valid negative review either. There might be some review bombing going on here for some less than realistic reason. No key for horizontal freeze camera. No key for original formation. Ships can't move past each other. It's just a typical dream game destroyed by people who never played the games. I backed the FIG campaign for the Physical Collector's Edition and played this series since I was 8 years. It pains me to give a negative thing. Wait for a discount and play Skirmish. Where's the name Homeworld? It has the story, character, sounds, and graphics, amazing looks, maps from Homeworld, but this game sadly is not Homeworld. Man, I'm really not getting any good negative reviews here. Greedy cash grab, they say. Even a positive one. Alright game with Netflix garbage series tier story. No time and effort was made to put in it. Neutral review. Messy gameplay. Pathfinding being hit and miss. So when I see a bunch of negative reviews like that, but none of them are getting into major good explanations of why they're being negatively reviewed, I have to just wonder if I need to wait longer. Spaceship Hard Space Shipbreaker apparently was made by the same people, and Earthless apparently is coming. Homeworld is mixed. Minecraft Legends is mixed. May very well be a case that they split their efforts between Minecraft Legends and Homeworld, and that may have hurt both games. Homeworld Deserts of Karak from 2015 is rated very positively. So weirdly, anything labeled Homeworld 2 is not listed here from this developer, which makes me wonder if a different developer made Homeworld 2, and there might be some disconnection there also. And see, this is the one game that, of all the games we've seen being released on Steam over the weekend, that has more relevancy to make a YouTube short around it. And I'm not gonna not make a YouTube short just because it's mixed reviewed, but sure would be nice when you have AA games and AAA games like this come out that it just comes out to full positive reviews instead of every single game potentially either having controversy around it or just being reviewed negatively for its lack of quality. Rightfully so. I wonder if maybe not so much gamers, but game developers and game publishers are also addicted to the drama and are actively encouraging controversy. Now, if this wasn't a prologue, I'd make a YouTube short around this, because this looks like this might be a funny game, World's Worst Handyman. In direct contrast to that, I would not make a YouTube short on this. So yeah, very few games today. Still probably about 30 games to make YouTube shorts on. Way more than what it should be. Let's see. So that's going to bring us to the SteamDB page with the 24-hour peak. Let's see, I have a twinge here that I'd like to take this data and make my own chart on it, but let's just compare visuals on the charts versus SteamDB. SteamDB just feels like it's got more polish to it, so it's kind of pointless to try and make that into a chart when I can look at the same information. Although the problem here with looking at this information is I scroll down through the top 10 to 20 games and it's always the exact same games. Today we could say Hades 2 is noticeable at the 18th position with 87,878 players at a 24-hour peak, but that's kinda it. Fallout 4 seems like it is jumped up higher. I feel like it was at 11 before, so 7 is quite the jump. V Rising seems like it is also going up. Helldivers 2 is in the 10th position. You really have to question if a lot of these games don't have hundreds of thousands of bots in them, Counter-Strike 2 in particular. Or it may just be Valve is lying in its own database about how many people are actually playing that game. But yeah, I'd like to see more of the newer games. I'd like to be able to filter it, and that's where I think my other chart is going to come into play, is that if I took the top 100 bits of data and then I filtered out every single game that wasn't released in 2024, then I'd have a very short list probably that would be helpful. What I need to do though, if I was going to try and collect that data, is figure out a way to get a release date and filter it from SteamDB. I'm not sure this is the source to get that. There may be another chart here that would be a better source, not just most played games. Filtered by category, new all-time peaks perhaps might give me more interesting information. Yeah, looking at this list, a new all-time peak would present something like Marvel Rivals Playtest and Homeworld 3 and then you get into some much smaller games that perhaps deserve a little bit more of a look. Of course, these numbers are pathetically low. 300 players in a 24-hour peak. Yeah. And you can definitely see that there's a lot of games here that probably just got lucky to get that many peaks. Yeah. And so this is probably the wrong patch. The wrong one. Too. Let's see, are any of these other charts gonna be helpful? A lot of these filters don't even seem like they make sense. Steam is learning. Might see one here for Steam Deck at some point. Doesn't seem like there's a list like that yet. Yep. If I was to filter things just by single player, that might give you an interesting insight also. But that's if the thing actually loads. Yeah. This would probably be helpful information for me specifically, since I only play single player. Unfortunately, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna have to take yet another bathroom break, so I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. It is very much a catch-22 where I drink a lot of water because the live streams go long, and I still have yet to figure out a way to guarantee live streams don't go long. And then I have to go to the bathroom, and that makes the live streams go even longer. So yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Hades 1 seeing a bit of a bump. See, I feel like that is something that, by looking just at single player and not just looking at the 24-hour peak of the most played games, that's something that just isn't, I just don't think it shows up as easily. That Hades 1 is at the 36th spot. My main issue though would be, if I'm going to improve my data collection here, I need to figure out a way to get the release dates, which is hidden behind here. And I think that was the problem, is that I could never figure out how to get my macro to get the information from this pop-up so that you would see a release date there. I don't think, I'd have to think about how you would do that. Here's Terraria mod loader, I assume is what this is, being more played than Terraria itself, which is weird. But yeah, I also need to speed up just the way in which information is collected, because it is way too slow. Yeah, the whole process takes way too long just to grab the top 20 games, let alone the top 100. And I don't know how to improve that. Well, there's one way. It's going to take a lot of work though. What I did manage to find a way to improve though is my chart. So I've opted to try and make the chart as far as trending games and 24-hour peak, that same information we've seen from SteamDB, try to make it more manageable by just having fewer points of games to look at and squishing the sales numbers a little bit. So now the total number of players, not sales numbers, is 50,000 at the low and 300,000 players at the high. And I also cleaned up some of the data entries points, so there's a few things there. I almost wonder if it wouldn't be better to squeeze some of the data entry points down and just average them out. That would be less accurate information, certainly, but if I took a week samples, averaged them together, there would be less points between, say, here and here. But that's not the big issue. The big issue was there was too many games being shown, so there were too many games showing up here and here. And so overall, we can see like Pal World has fallen below the 30,000 charts, and Path of Exile has fallen below the important charts. And so the Tom Clancy Rainbow Six has managed to get within average. There is this very narrow band somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 players, 72,000 I guess, and 100,000 players. And this seems to be the sweet spot for most Steam games, is that if you can get your game to be very successful at the first day that I started collecting data, and then just manage to not have your game fall downward afterwards too much, you will settle into the sweet spot that seems to last a fairly decent amount. Now, there are some exceptions here. In the Apex Legends, I think got an update and then skyrocketed far above the chart, and has only started to fall down a little bit fairly recently. And Naraka Blade Point skyrocketed fairly highly at one point and got shifted into this higher scale, whereas Helldivers 2 skyrocketed when it first came out, but is now falling more into that sweet spot after all the controversies of the PlayStation Network account potentially being required. Yeah. There is an overall trend line that shows that around this time, let's see, around 1/1/24. Oh yeah, that's another thing. I filtered this down so that the dates would only go back to 2024. I had forgotten I'd done that. So there was a lot more information, a couple more months of information, but we just want to look at this year at this point. So from that to 5/13/2024, which would be today, and apparently I don't have any data points at all for today somehow. I don't know how that happened. Maybe I messed it up. Yeah. Truth is, I don't know how to make these charts. It's a miracle I got them to work this well. Like, I don't know how to use Google Excel and make pivot tables the way I'd like them to work. And I really was just fiddling with settings and hoping it would spit something out that looked like it was right, and hope it was right. But yeah. The overall trend from 2024 seems to be New Year, Christmas time, people buy games, play games, and it has just been overall trending downward and downward and downward. There have been some pop-out hits, but if I was to do an end-of-year review based on this data, I mean, I talk about Pal World, and I would mention some of the older games still doing really well. I talk about Helldivers 2. I want to talk about Stellar Blade, but it's not even on the chart. Which, yeah, I feel like Stellar Blade is relevant. By the numbers, it really isn't. Is that a major problem, and does that highlight how so many games get canceled or don't get sequels when gamers feel like they do? Yes, absolutely. Now I'd like to have a full list down here or have something else down here, but I don't know how to do that. It'd be fine if this told me a few more games, because these are in their, I believe, overall highest all-time peak number. Which Pal World, I believe, did beat Counter-Strike 2 overall. But yeah, there's really no way to have a secondary chart here to just say, hey, let's just talk about games that came out in 2024, because that really would just be Pal World and Helldivers 2. And yeah, I would have to find something else that has a dot that starts here. Lost Epoch. Yeah. And that doesn't even seem like that's the case. It seems like Lost Epoch started very low and just jumped up. Probably because I'm missing some information there. And see, that would be a fairly boring list, and I could see being confused and thinking Stardew Valley was a new game, but it isn't. May have gotten updates in DLC. That would be the other issue, certainly, is if this was just Pal World, Helldivers 2, and Lost Epoch on the chart. On top of being a small chart, there is just a high chance of information being misconstrued, as updates probably should be mentioned also. And if you're going to include updates, then you probably then have to include Counter-Strike 2 and Dota and PUBG and just every single game on this chart, because almost certainly every single game has gotten updates. Speaking of updates, No More Heroes on Steam has also gotten updates. Just out of the blue. I noticed that on the Steam library interface on my Steam client, which that almost certainly highlights that there is situations here where games get updates and they should be reported on by mainstream video game journalists, and they just aren't. Fallout 76 apparently has also gotten updates. Now tell me why Fallout 76 has only 3 screenshots. Yeah. Mountain Blade Bannerlord is another game that probably has some relevance to talk about. Here we can see a Steam Deck ad with them showing off a Steam Deck and Hades 2 uniquely around Hades 2. Then we have an anniversary sale, publisher sale for Humble Games, and a Dear Villagers publisher sale. Still an end. Visual novel on sale, making it to the front page. That's kind of surprising. Dying Light. Yeah, Dying Light Definitive Edition for $9.99. Probably worth grabbing. If you don't have it, do I have it? Let me just check that in a second. Dying Light, the following Enhanced Edition. Apparently do have. I don't know if Watch Dogs matters anymore. It almost certainly doesn't. I doubt we'd see another Watch Dogs game. Returnal, I think. Well, Returnal has been on Steam. I thought this game wasn't on Steam. Yeah, I get confused about that, obviously. They just announced they were going to do like a comic book manga based on Returnal. What I'm interested in seeing is if the other ad for Steam Deck is on the front page, and it seems like it isn't. So they spent all of that money, however much that was, Steam Deck taking the #1 spot as far as top sellers, 82 in pre-order, #3. Animal Well doing very well. Also, I think we can look at that and probably put that on Steam. Still ours. But yeah, they spent energy making a much bigger commercial banner for the Steam Deck, and it just did not really connect or make sense. Where's this supposed to lead to? Yeah. So it says Hades 2 is verified on the Steam Deck. It has its own separate page, which feels like the least you could do here is then have other games verified by algorithm, other verified Steam Deck games listed below this. And if I just click on the Steam Deck, you've got the full screen ad here. Yep. This live action commercial just doesn't make sense on the front page of Steam. Nothing else is really live action. Even live action games never make it here. And so now they've stretched it here. And it is definitely a different color palette now. The Steam Deck OLED version being pushed with the red and white color palette, and real people in the real world playing on the Steam Deck. I think I may have finally gotten the sticky button on my Steam Deck to be a little bit less sticky, but I also turned on my Steam Deck just to install updates and then turned it off again. I'm very much not utilizing it well. Yeah, I have to be honest about that. But yeah, all the new updates didn't seem like they really did anything new other than convincing me that if there's a spring sale or summer sale and they are going to discount the Steam Dock even a little bit, I would recommend getting this Steam Dock, even though it's not ideally the best Steam Dock I'd ever want to get. There's going to be slightly better support for the Steam Dock than anything else. Yeah. And the main thing I'm iffy on the Steam Dock from Valve is just going to be the number of USB ports and the speed of the USB ports, as far as what kind of external hard drive should you plug into the back of it, which is really what you should do. It's just like 500 gigabytes to several terabytes for 16 terabyte external hard drive plugged into it, just holding a whole bunch of, I mean, even ROMs and movies and things like that at 16 terabytes would be a struggle to fill up. And you want to be careful not to be overly ambitious. But the firmware on this with the HDMI CEC being updated says this is the Steam Deck that they are going to recommend. Why do they have a picture of so many other objects? I mean, yes, theoretically you could probably connect every single one of these devices to the Steam Deck through the dock, but are you really going to run a 3D printer plugged into the desktop mode of your Steam Deck, leaving your Steam Deck next to the vibrations of a 3D printer for hours, if not days? That doesn't make any sense. A lot of these are wireless. One of the 8BitDo controllers like this was on sale, or keyboards was on sale. They occasionally go on sale. Yeah, you'd kind of expect all of these to be wireless. And then giant speakers, probably a little bit too much. Now, interestingly, you can see an Xbox controller here, an 8BitDo controllers and fight sticks and accessibility sticks. There is no PlayStation controller anywhere here at all. I don't even know what this is. And it's just a picture, so this may be a Braille reader. For all I know, I'd have to investigate what this device is. This might be some kind of unique musical keyboard or organ controller, or this might be just some fictional controller they made up. If this was for like blind people, I don't see how you'd actually be able to use it. And if this was for stenography, this is far too many buttons, I think, for stenography. Although maybe not. The layout seems weird for a stenography input. And yes, I imagine you could plug in a digital guitar into the dock, but would you really do that? This again looks just like this is a fictional picture of a fictional device, where in contrast this looks like a real device, because I know it is a real device. But yeah, the main Steam Deck is 3 USB 3.1 connections, a DisplayPort 1.4, which is nice, but you're not likely, man, you can't even see that with the background changing. Let's see if that resets any of that. You're highly unlikely to use DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.0. I think HDMI might be 3.0. And yeah, gigabit Ethernet is fast enough, but USB 3.1 is probably a little slow too. So for $70, I don't think you're getting as much as you would like. In most cases, probably want to convert a DisplayPort to HDMI cord, not use the HDMI 2.0. And I'm not sure you can do both at the same time. If you could get 2 monitors from that, that would be different. MST, is this Microsoft? No, multi-stream transport enabled for multi-monitor support. Interesting. MST support currently requires both the HDMI and display ports to be in use. Update is forthcoming. I'd have to investigate what multi-stream transport even is. Let's see, USB-C power delivery pass-through. Doesn't tell you how much power, whether it's a 20 watt, 40 watt, or something in between. But yeah, even looking at before the caveats, $80 is a lot there. And they have on other manufacturers have made docks that have NVMe connections built in, so you can add another NVMe memory stick. There's some docks that mount directly to the back of the Steam Deck, and then you would just place the Steam Deck down on the ground. I'm not sure anybody really is going to put it in the dock and then look at the screen. I'm not even sure you really could do that with the HDMI and DisplayPort connections. Yeah. And every single one of these ports could have been built in if they made it maybe a little bit thicker in the middle here. You could just have a row of connections and a built-in kickstand at the bottom. And yeah, that's what I think they should do, is make a backplate that has a deck, just a dock, not deck, built into the middle. And you could just have HDMI, power, everything right there. It wouldn't take up the top slot. It would go with you where you carried the Steam Deck. It might have an awkward little triangle kickstand, but that wouldn't be too big of a deal. The Steam Deck should still, in that with that kind of backplate modification, lay flat on the controller edges, and you could add more cooling in the whole process too. Anyways, I'm mostly rambling here. Let's see, what were we gonna investigate here? Animal well was one of the things I was gonna investigate. We can see it is overwhelmingly positive, so there's no reason to leave that on the follow list. It's not an early access or anything. And all I guess I can really say is congratulations to Billy Basso and Video Game Donkey's publishing company, Big Mode. The next challenge will be the next game, I imagine. As far as Dying Light Definitive Edition, okay, I don't own it because there is a massive amount of DLC here for another $56, and I'm not sure that any of this is really necessary. Seems like a lot of this is buying items. See, I have like the Ultimate Survival bundle, so who's to say that these aren't just the same content? Because sometimes they will do that too, so they will give you the same content over and over again in different ways. So I do have the following. I do have the main game. I do have the season pass. And the season pass, on top of that, I do have DLC. I think that would probably put me in a good enough position where if there really was any gameplay content that was being missed from all these other bundles, probably wouldn't care that much. First thing first would definitely be for me to buy all the bundles. Yeah, some of this is like 5th anniversary edition for the game. Yeah, I don't think I would engage with any of that. Man, it certainly has taken a long time to get to this point. And yeah, I'm still trying to recover. Still getting subscribers, still getting views, yes, but I'm still trying to recover as far as these video game news streams replacing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Titled streams. It definitely wasn't a direct trade-off there. Some of that I imagine is thumbnail issues, but some of that definitely is just suggestions in the algorithm and the title. Let's do the headlines. For some reason the headlines didn't seem to work last time, so hopefully they will work this time as far as making clips, which is still something I'm experimenting with, and I think it does help. But I've totally forgotten about adding chapter markers to the videos, which, yeah, that would be the next thing to do. But yeah, headline clips. Let's do it. Assassin's Creed Shadows release date and DLC details have seemingly leaked. This is all from videogameschronicle.com, by the way. And it really isn't that much news today. Square Enix confirms US and EU layoffs as part of its restructuring. Fallout 4 adds new graphics and performance options on PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S. Assassin's Creed codename Red gets its official title and reveal trailer coming this week. Going to be called Assassin's Creed Shadows and will be released before April 2025. Red Dead Redemption could finally be coming to PC, a data mine suggests. Warner Brothers U-turns on the decision to delist indie games published by Adult Swim. The Rogue Prince of Persia receives a new release date. The game was recently delayed because of Hades 2 surprise release. Important to point out also Red Dead Redemption, the second game, the first game technically is Red Dead Revolver, which I don't believe is on Steam either. But also most people probably don't care about the first game because I don't think it had the same characters or the same feeling to it. It would be a very old game. A new Doom game could be revealed at the Xbox Showcase in June. New Multiversus trailer shows the Joker in action, suggests that the Powerpuff Girls are coming. Well, that would be very believable and definitely highlights the weirdness around the idea of having Multiversus and Warner Brother characters and cartoons like the Joker fighting the Powerpuff Girls. Shin Megami Tensei 5 is being delisted from the Switch eShop. The game will be removed the day before its enhanced version, Vengeance, is released. Weirdly, I thought it was going to be delisted everywhere. Maybe it's just the Nintendo eShop to avoid confusion. Maybe Nintendo has some specific rules that you can't have almost the same game listed twice. Certainly would be a different experience if it wasn't delisted on Steam, but it was delisted on this eShop. That would be slightly more palatable. Slightly. Not to people who exclusively buy games on the Switch, obviously, but to most people, yes. Unofficial PC ports of Nintendo 64 games could be about to get a lot easier. The Nintendo 64 Recompiled program could be capable of turning a Nintendo 64 game into a PC.exe in a matter of minutes. Square Enix confirms its canceled games which do not fit its new development strategy. Square Enix will make AAA platform games, multi-platform games, as part of its aggressive new business plan. They also want games to be developed using new skills and strategies and new software, I imagine, and not the old way that they used to make games. Fans revolt after EA nerfs the EA FC rewards that were, quote, too good. Normally that would bring me to Komatsu, but it didn't. And then Sony reportedly forms a studio with former Deviation game developers. So now we're at the Komatsu articles. Komatsu.com. See, this again is part of my macro that I thought I'd fixed, but still doesn't seem like it's working, because almost certainly of the 10 or so headlines we're about to go through, at least a couple of them would have Steam links and would have opened new tabs next to them, and it didn't happen. Beat-em-up action adventure game Big Helmet Heroes has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. That would be your Steam link. And this definitely is not a game I've seen anywhere else. Neptunia game maker R Evolution is coming to the Xbox Series in 2024. PlayStation and Switch versions launch on May 14th. So, is this a actual game maker? They're calling it an action RPG called Neptunia Game Maker R Evolution. Yeah, I don't think it is a way to make your own games. I think that's just a title. Let's see if we can maybe briefly see what the game looks like. The Neptunia series is parodying video game consoles, video games in general. So yeah, it seems like it's probably an action RPG game where the story is that the Neptunia characters are making games. That it is not something like RPG Maker on Steam where you actually would make RPGs. But it's kind of hard to tell with these trailers because you're definitely getting very flashy anime girl cutscenes type movies here. Opening movie, you're not getting any real gameplay footage. But yeah, apparently this is a new game too, and I don't even remember it being announced. Doesn't seem like it's coming to Steam or PC so far. It might come later. Assassin's Creed Shadows, formerly codenamed Red, to be unveiled on May 15th. Indica for the PS5 and Xbox Series launches on May 17th. It's currently available on the PC, and I believe we can say it is doing very positively on the PC. I feel like this is an example of a game that perhaps is a little too weird looking to get mainstream video game journalists to pay attention to it, when it is definitely the type of game that should get more attention. And if we were going to make an argument that video games should get awards like Emmys, this feels like the kind of smaller art house type video game that should be talked about and considered for more awards. They may very well have gotten some awards, and they have a fairly high Metacritic score. The Rogue Prince of Persia launches in early access on May 27th. Fabledom for the PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch launches in Q3 of 2024. Yep. Fabledom has been on PC since a while. May 13th. That's today. So it looks like it just came out of early access, if I was to guess. Multiversus, the Joker gameplay trailer, is available on Gematsu.com. Square Enix announces a new medium-term business plan. Square Enix reboots and awakens, 3 years of foundation laying for long-term growth. But they're getting more into the details here on Gematsu. So they're planning to spend just the next 3 years trying to turn things around, which in fairness is probably at least 1 year too short to turn things around and pivot. But at least in this case it feels like Square Enix is trying to actually do something, where if you were to compare that to, say, Microsoft just shutting down companies, yeah, Square Enix feels like they're working with the teams they have left a little bit more than Microsoft is. Although those are probably very unfair comparisons. If I really knew all the internal details that I would never know. A turn-based strategy game called 1-Inch Tactics for PC launches May 20th. Which, yeah. This might be something. It probably isn't going to be too much of anything, though, if I was to guess. Shin Megami Tensei 5 and all DLC is going to be delisted on June 13th. The Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance is due out June 14th. again, I misread this. It is just the Nintendo eShop. Let's see. It may very well be a case, though, that Shin Megami Tensei 5 was never actually released on other platforms. But I can tell you, even looking at these screenshots as they zoom by, these feel like these are slightly different screenshots from what Shin Megami Tensei 5, the base game, had. What I can't really tell you, though, is whether I'd ever care or want to play Shin Megami Tensei games in the first place. Witch and Lilies launches in early access on May 24th. This looks like it's a dungeon crawler RPG. Interesting. You've got some, I would say this is falling closer into the moe anime style of anime girls. And yeah, they're all showing decent amount of skin in some of these images. I would want to keep an eye out for this game just to see if it ends up in the adult section or not allowed on Steam. We haven't had a major censorship happen on Steam in a few months, but I could certainly see them being upset about just bellies showing and cleavage showing on moe anime girl styles, where they're anatomically shorter than a real human would ever look by quite a bit. That's typically how I describe the moe styles, that they're more like a teddy bear than a human in their proportions. Giant heads, short arms, short small hands, short legs. Moving on. Love Live Nijigasaki High School Idol Club visual novel has been officially subtitled as Tokimiki no Mirai Chizu, which, what they mean by subtitled here is not that they subtitled it into English as much as they have given a subtitle to the visual novel, so you actually know the specific name of that specific visual novel instead of just the name of the series of different types of media. There's, with that subtitle, no indication whatsoever that it would ever come to the West or be in English. Spark the Electric Jester 3 is coming to the Switch. This was also released on Steam and is rated very positively, so I think I'll go ahead and put that on the wish list and make a YouTube short on it. And that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com headlines. We've got a couple of those, but not too many. How Cryptmaster turned a dictionary's worth of words into a fun dungeon crawler. I have no idea what this game is. This is one of those interviews / sponsored articles pretending to be news from GameDeveloper.com, if I was to guess. Little Kitty Big City tops 100,000 sales in 2 days. Square Enix is rebooting its game business around multi-platform development and unforgettable experiences, quote unquote. Which, you know, Square Enix and pretty much any game company should be built around the idea of unforgettable experiences. You don't want to be like Bethesda, where you make games full of forgettable experiences. That would definitely be my suggestion. Australian studio Mighty Kingdom is laying off 28% of its staff. And watch what happens when devs turn their games up to 1,000. Which this Seems like this is yet another sponsored article that is being treated like it's a real article, or in this case this may just be a bunch of people on Twitter playing around, changing certain settings to 1,000, but because of Twitter's API limitations and high costs, nobody is willing to actually directly show you the post on Twitter, and so now it's just trying to get you to click to view it on X/Twitter, which, yep, I'm not willing to spend the time on that. And this would have been my fall list, and yet my fall list, this is not the fall list, this is all new games. Where did the fall list go? We have the interstitial screen for the fall list, but the actual link to the fall list is missing. Interesting. Well, whatever. It didn't work, regardless. Still have broken macros. Still have programming to do. Still have Fallout New Vegas to play. So, now is the best time so far to end. So, as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.